keep your comments to 2 minutes. I've been a little lax on that in the past, but I am going to attempt to actually hold people to 2 minutes. And if you do go, find that you need more than 2 minutes, I just want you to know, like, we do want to hear you. It's okay. It's weird to hear your own voice there. We do want to hear you, and so I'd recommend that anything further, please email us. We do read all of that, and that's very helpful. So, but it is also good to get out of here before 10 o'clock. So, we got to just keep it going. All right. So, anyone have anything they want to bring up that is otherwise not on our agenda? Okay, great. We've already spoken some, so what's left?
I just, at your suggestion, took the issue of the hydrant.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. And also where you live.
Montpelier.
Okay, thank you.
I took the issue of the hydrant. I got clarity from the city manager. A hydrant ticket, which on an area that had been parked. The ticket says parked 6 feet from a hydrant. I went up and measured the current recurring stream of cars that park. They're minimum 9 feet from the hydrant. So our ordinance does not reference 6 feet. It just says no car or horse in the general vicinity thereof. So we've got a problem with the ordinance. We've got a problem with uneven enforcement, but I'm happy to take whoever I need to take up there and prove that you can't park closer than 9 feet without totally parking on top of the sidewalk, covering the entire sidewalk. So you need to clean up your ordinance, and you need to clarify that appeals of a parking ticket need to go somewhere beyond the PD saying this appeal is final, because then I'm told that it's to the city council or elsewhere. I'm going to raise the parking thing for the benefit of the rest of the council. The new parking lot going in behind the Mowat property has 18 new spaces in it and anticipates trucks backing in from Main Street, where the Main Street and Barry Street intersection, backing all the way into Abishans. The truck drivers will not do that. It's been clearly stated that they won't do that. The only solution needs to be planned now while that construction is still malleable, to possibly forfeit 4 spots in the North Branch lot behind Positive Pie.
So, Stephen, it's been about 2 minutes. Try to think about wrapping up.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I did ask that the issues of CV fiber, EC fiber, this fiber on the heat plant, and CVPSA be made formal agenda items, because I've been bringing them up for over a year, and they've not been put on the agenda, and I can't fit them into my 2 minute spots.
Fair enough. If you remember to email me, we'll see if we can find a spot for that on the agenda. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Sigrid Olson, and I live on Main Street in Montpelier. And I don't have anything to bring up. I just wanted to introduce myself and say that I'm a member of the Social and Economic Justice Advisory Committee. And there's 2 of us here tonight, and one of our goals is to make sure that we have members attending. So just wanted to say hi.
Great. Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Anyone else? If you're bringing up an item from the consent agenda, we are going to take it up soon, just so you know. Unless you have something else. It's all good.
Holly Wilkins, President of United Motorcyclists of Vermont. Our organization has been conducting the toy run to benefit Shriners Hospitals for Children for 32 years. It is always the second Saturday in August. It is always kickstands up at noon. It is a tradition for a generation of Vermonters who ride. They plan their weekends around it. They know the schedule. They don't need to consult anything. They just know what's going to happen, and we make it happen. The Shriners, and we have the potentate here, this gentleman here, are always very appreciative. We have raised over hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of toys and cash and checks that go towards research for the Shriners Hospitals. Our chairman, or chairperson for this committee, came here on April 4th to file for our street closure that we always do. He found out that the farmers market had been granted street closure in our time slot. We had not been given any heads up about this, which is kind of odd. Tony Fakos knows us. I thought maybe it would raise a couple of, oh, isn't that when the toy run is? We didn't hear about it. I immediately tried to contact someone from the farmers market to talk about it, to see if possibly they could give up one Saturday. And apparently they are down for every Saturday, which is great for them, 26 Saturdays. All we need is a fraction of one Saturday to try to keep our current time slot, because we know if we change this routine, we will lose participants. It's just a given. It's just so hard to get people anyway with their schedules. So the manager contacted me. She said they would be able to close 1 hour early, close at noon, but however, I guess it takes them 2 hours to break down. So she said that they could close at noon and we could come through at 2 p.m. I have to say, I'm sorry, but we cannot do that. We cannot change our schedule that much.
So I'm going to interrupt you, not because...
Your mic isn't working.
Oh, is my mic not working? I got to get closer. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. We're going to take this up basically as a part of the consent agenda. So I'm going to ask you to come back. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
I already got 2 minutes in there,
Yeah,
right?
there you go. Fair
Okay.
enough.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
I'll
thank
be
you.
listening.
Okay, sounds good.
It'll be just a couple minutes.
Yeah, it'll be really soon. Okay, anyone else for an item that's otherwise not on our agenda? Okay, so we're going to move on. So to the consent agenda. Now I know there are some items that people want to pull. Is there a motion or things people want to pull? Okay.
I don't think any of the mics are working. I couldn't hear anything.
You have to get really close.
Especially tonight with the air conditioning running.
All right, we're taking... Yeah.
There's something wrong.
How's it now? Can you hear me?
There you go.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we're taking O off the consent agenda.
I've got something to add also. I've got a last-minute first-class liquor license request from the Abbey Group, which does catering at the State House, and they were just advised to, even though they don't have a physical location, to just get a first-class license through us. I also just want to mention real quick, I'm sorry, in regards to the minutes, I just received a correction over email, and I just want to put out there and recognize it that I've already changed it online, that item 19-165, paragraph 2, the word mean has been changed to meet. There was a typo in there, so that is now corrected.
And I assume if someone would take item C off so that we can further discuss the toy run.
I'll pull C.
Okay. Is there a motion to move the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
That makes sense.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? All right. Oh, yes. Did you have anything more for further discussion? If
For
not,
the
that's
consent agenda?
fine. For the consent agenda, yeah.
First of all, I want to apologize because I have to leave early tonight, so apologies that I'll miss some agenda items. The only thing I wanted to note that was on the consent agenda, I'm going to vote in support of it, but was just looking at the plastic piping for our drinking water, and having just been in Bennington for an event on Friday and seeing the impacts of chemical contamination of drinking water on a community there and how devastating it's been. HDPE as a plastic pipe is one of the better plastics, but just something, and I apologize I didn't have time to talk to Tom before this evening, so I just wanted to raise it as something that I hope we are already looking at, or if not, would love to talk with the Public Works team on just how we're looking at cost, performance, and just health impacts of different choices of piping that we're making. So I will have that conversation offline, but just wanted to raise it as something I was thinking about.
Thank you. Okay, there is, any further discussion? On the consent agenda as amended, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we're going to immediately take up these other two items, and actually I think we should probably do O first, and then we'll do C. So, yeah, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jack.
Okay, thank you. I thought of this idea. I'll give people a general idea. This came to my mind last year when I was newly on the council and didn't come to me in time to didn't think of it in time to get it adopted. Many people know that June 19th is recognized, especially in the African American community, as Juneteenth, as the end of slavery in the United States, and so I have circulated and proposed a resolution or a proclamation recognizing Juneteenth in Montpelier, and I'd like to read it so people know what the content is, and there may be some discussion. Whereas the history of slavery in the United States is a history of unspeakable brutality and oppression, and whereas the existence of slavery, beginning with the earliest settlements in what became the United States and continuing through the Civil War, was a betrayal of the values in the United States was created to defend, and whereas the proclamation of the end of slavery in Texas on June 19th, 1865, long after both the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of the Civil War, is widely recognized as the end of slavery in the United States, and whereas with the experience of over 150 years of history, we now know that the official eradication of slavery was merely a start to the continuing effort to liberate this formerly enslaved people and their descendants. And whereas June 19th, celebrated as Juneteenth, celebrates African American freedom and achievement while encouraging continuous self-development and respect for all cultures. And whereas Juneteenth celebrates the fundamental promise of America and the need for all Americans to continue to work for universal justice and freedom. And whereas the city of Montpelier is committed to the values of liberty and justice enunciated in our Declaration of Independence and Constitution. And whereas the city of Montpelier is further committed to providing a home for all peoples and cultures to form the Montpelier community. Now, therefore, it is resolved that June 19th, 2019 is recognized in the city of Montpelier as Juneteenth, and it is further resolved that the people of Montpelier are encouraged to celebrate the fundamental American values that underlie the founding of our nation, our state, and our city, and to recommit themselves to the cause of liberty, justice, and acceptance of all people. And I move that we adopt this.
I'll second.
Further discussion? I just want to say thank you, Jack, for making sure this was on our agenda and also for highlighting it and reading it. That was great. Any further discussion? Okay. Comment? Yes? No?
No, just reiterating. It sounds great.
Okay.
Thanks, Jack.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you. All right. So on to C. So this is the item regarding the toy run on August 10th. So if you want to come back, actually you can come up and sit at the table if you'd like, and I'm sure Tony, you probably also want to be. I don't know if you want to come up here and sit up here as well, or if you.
Yeah, if you want to, you can either
Or we
sit
just do
facing
this
the
one at a
people or
time?
facing us, but those are mics that you can use.
Yeah, sure.
The seats.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
if you have anything, I mean, I know you were starting to explain your situation. If you have
Yes.
anything more you want to add to that? Now
Yes,
is okay.
I say, well, in our last episode, I left off at finding out that the farmers market was granted the slot that we have. And I contacted the farmers market manager, and she sent me an email. And she suggested that, she said that they were willing to close at noon, and then that would allow us to come through at 2 p.m., which still is time-wise not good for us. We feel that the responsibility of compromise perhaps should be on the newcomers who are in this spot for the very first time ever, who are for profit, who aren't doing a charity run, rather than the people who have been in place for 32 years, are nonprofit, and are doing a charity run, and are only asking for a fraction of one Saturday, as opposed to the farmers market, who has 26 Saturdays, to do business. And I guess that's it for me.
Okay, great. Anything you all want to add? If not, that's fine, but.
Yeah,
Donnie's
name's
former president.
Don Hannum, former president of the UMB. I was down here before when they tried to shut us down for the street there a few years back. Like I said, we've been doing this for 32 years. I mean, it's all about the crippled and burned kids, I mean, like Holly said, hundreds of thousands of dollars in toys, and and they're gonna, they're here for profit, and they can't give us one day. I'm just a tad bit annoyed, but this is the head of the Shriners.
Hello, my name's Michael Parent. I'm the potentate, or translated, that means I'm the president of the local Shriners, the Mount Sinai Shriners out of Montpelier. We've been fortunate enough to have United Motorcyclists support us with their toy run. I would hope that there's some sort of compromise that can be made so that their event can help us. They're wonderful. They bring basically 3 to 4 truckloads of toys in for the children. They do make monetary donations, which do go to the hospitals to help. I'm sure it was an oversight in the timing and the days that may have caused the problem. I'm just hoping there's some way it can be worked around so that they can keep their scheduling and it can continue to go on.
Thank you. Tony, yeah.
The only thing for the record is that we have supported, we being the Montpelier Police Department, have ordered officers in. We're the only department that does for 32 years. And I think I've only been able to ride in this event maybe once because I'm working it usually. That being said, I just want to make that clear that the City of Montpelier, through the police department's actions and Public Works, always has and will continue to support this event. As far as compromise, that's a key word. I did reach out to, because I was not part of the original conversations, with the farmers market. But once we realized that, the city worked, together to try to come up with a compromise, recognizing that there was an oversight, if you will, because of when the permit came in. I did speak with Michael Burt after learning that the farmers market was, going to close early, and we thought, well, they give up an hour, and we can, there can be a delay in the ride start, and by an hour, then that would be the compromise. That was how I left it. I know Mr. Burt did say he had to bring it to the organization for a, it wasn't, he didn't have the, obviously the sole say, and so here we all are. But I just want to let you know what the what's happening behind the scenes, and again, just want to make clear that the City of Montpelier has and will continue to support the event, just to get through that. So, and whatever responsibility there for communication, I also accept on behalf of the police department. So.
And the other thing is, our permit that we set in, when we got the copy back, it'd been whited out, and everything been changed, and without our consent.
Without contact.
They didn't even tell us.
Thank you. Also, I'm wondering if there's anyone here from the farmers market. If not, that's fine. Any other, I know, Vicki, you had something you want to say. So you all don't have to hang out up here if you don't want to, but thank you. And then, so we'll take some comments from the public, and then I think we'll see about where to go from here.
I just didn't hear it stated what time you wanted. Was it 1:30? Was it 1? What time did you want?
We leave Blue Cross at noon, so at 12:30 we're coming through town.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't have that time.
Okay, and usually the street is closed, I think, an hour ahead of time is what we ask for.
You can just hang out.
Right here. We're going to be discussing this.
Yeah. Vicki.
And you can speak more than
I only just heard about this tonight, since I'm here for another thing. Vicki Lane, and I live in Montpelier. I don't think that anything should prevent the toy run from happening as it's happened always. I think if the farmer's market has to either lose one Sunday or one Saturday or move back to 60 State Street for one Saturday, I think that's fine. I don't think the farmer's market should get it over the toy run.
Okay, thank you. Any further comment?
Peter Kelman, I live in Montpelier. Toy Run is great. Everybody here would like to support the Toy Run for sure. I think characterizing the farmers market as a for-profit activity really glosses over the fact that the farmers market has dozens of very small vendors whose livelihood depends on its operation. So I would just like us to make sure that we do actually work out a compromise. They've given up an hour. I'd like to ask the Toy Run group whether they could work out a way to also give up an hour so there is actually a compromise. It's an unfortunate issue, but I don't think that the farmers market should be dismissed. We're talking about dozens of very small farmers.
Steve Whitaker. I would note that the market was moved onto State Street in anticipation of the Haney lot not being available due to garage construction.
That's not totally correct.
I can't hear you through your mic.
That's not totally correct.
But there, other than about 20 feet where the bridge has now been installed, the lot is still there and available for, I don't know if they've added too many merchants, but it is possible that for one Saturday, the market could fit into and around the garage in the Haney lot and around. So I think honoring the seniority, especially when I've watched the seniority play out in the farmer's market, honoring the seniority of the Toy Run and the flexibility of the market to take advantage of, it'll take a week of planning, but they could fit those merchants into the Haney lot and in and around the garage, even around the back of the garage. I'm sure the vet would cooperate, etc.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ken Russell. I live on Elm Street. Thank you for coming. I appreciate the Toy Run. I appreciate the farmers market. I think this is a great opportunity for these different groups to work out something positive. My family's lived in Vermont forever, but I'm also kind of a transplant in other ways. So I'm part flatlander, you know, part tree hugger, and I can't help but note that that's part of potentially some conflict here. So I think, you know, I don't know how it takes a while for how long does it take for the motorcycles to go through? Like half hour to get through? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like there's got to be something that in the spirit of working together and appreciating what each other are, and not like negativity about this group or that group. Like, you know, maybe the farmers market could have a great hurrah and get the place ready for 12:30, or maybe you guys could move it a little bit, or maybe I've probably shutting off Langdon Street would just be a nightmare. But it'd be kind of fun to try. No, but I think bottom line is the spirit of this is an opportunity to work things out, and not be all like, oh, farmers versus motorcycles or whatever, just to say it, and all that.
Thanks, Ken.
Thomas Moore, Prospect Street, Montpelier. I ride in this Toy Run, you know, as much as I can, and it's a good group of people that come from all over Vermont, and just to get the one time to use, you know, State Street. It is my street, and I am a resident here too, and I'd like to use State Street once in a while. I don't go to all the events that happen here. I mean, we closed down State Street for what, presidential candidates, dancing in the street, parades and everything. You know, it's let's share it with everybody, you know. I'd like to use it too, just one day. you know? And it's a real good thing. And these people, they're not out there to raise hell and have a keg party, bonfires, mud wrestling, and all that. They're there, well, you can get biker parties like that. But this is just something that is for kids. You know, have you ever seen the commercial from Shriners? You know, it gets to you. And I would just like my city to give me maybe one day of State Street, one day. And then you can do your dances and do your farmers markets, you can do parades, but just one day. Not for me, but mostly it is for the kids. It is. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you come up again, Stephen, I want to check to see if there's anybody else who has not yet spoken. Oh, yeah, and you go ahead and come on over here, and you just get in line, too, if you want.
I'm Laura Smith-Reeve. I live on Berlin Street. I am a farmer, have a small farm up there. Some folks might have noticed the sheep that have moved in up at the top of the hill. Thank you. I do not vend at the Montpelier Farmers Market, but I have vended at markets for years, and I would put my vote in for the spirit of cooperation to find a compromise. Thank you.
I wanted to agree with you about seeing if possibly the farmers market could be extremely accommodating, because even a small compromise will throw off things for the toy run phenomenally. So I don't have hard details, but I greatly appreciate the toy run. I also think, and I'm taking a big chance here saying this, that Montpelier has a reputation in some circles as being a tad snobby. And I know that's not what this is about. I love the toy run, and I have done a lot of work with kids in foster care and with people who are homeless, and I'll tell you, one of my go-to groups, when I just want to say, hey, can anybody help me out with this, is this group. So I would really like to see the fabulous toy run really respected and allowed to continue in the same slot. So, and I would do anything I could to help. I don't know what it would be, but to help with any communication that needs to happen to help make that happen.
Before you go, could you just identify yourself for the record?
Thank you. My name is Lauren Sales.
Thanks.
Stephen, and you did also already have 2 minutes.
No, I did not. She showed the 1 minute when I left.
Okay, okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
1 minute and 15 seconds to be exact.
45 seconds, less the amount you just wasted. As a technical possible compromise, for that one day, the market could potentially be asked to lay out entirely in one lane and throw up some police tape and let them ride right through. If staff and the police tape solution works, it's a challenge, but it is possible compromise that would be exciting for both.
Great, thank you. Anything further? If you want to, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Since this is about you know, get more time.
As we said, the spirit of cooperation is vital lots of times, and making compromises. I do want to point out that in the communique I got from the farmers market manager, she said that they have gone ahead and secured all of next year State Street, which I didn't know was possible, that you could do this a year in advance. I guess we could have done this every year if we knew this was possible, but they are in place for next year and advised us, the collective United Motorcyclists of Vermont, to make alternate plans, alternate routes, alternate times. That is her message to us.
Okay. All right, good to know. Thank you. So I have a suggestion to make, which is that I think we should... Oh, sorry. Yeah, Vicki, did you already speak? I can't remember.
Just briefly.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can pull that down. Let's not forget all the kids and people that come out to watch the toy run.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Great, thank you. All right, so my suggestion would be that I don't know that we're going to be able to work out all the nitty-gritty like logistics here tonight in this venue. I'm fine with holding off on approving this for now in the hopes that the folks from the Shriners and the Toy Run can, again, work something out together with the farmers market. And because I also believe that, you know, there may be a solution out there that that could work for everybody. So that's my suggestion. Other thoughts from the council? I guess what I'm saying is I would recommend that we table it. Donna, then Connor?
Well, I would just like to get a reaction. If indeed the route was modified, that you did go down Langdon Street, is that something that's been discussed with the police? Is that off the table totally, or is it a possibility? Just to go around them, Langdon, then back to State?
I guess we would have to do like a site review, because logistically it's guiding safely 600 plus motorcycles. We're also trying to get to where we park. We have the Red Knights motorcycle route.
You should be at the mic so they can hear you.
And then,
anyway,
sorry, go ahead. Yep.
And maybe you don't want to get in the detail, but nobody mentioned alternative route, and I just didn't
right.
understand.
Ooh, shock. Electric. Just logistically, I guess, figuring out if the route would work with the amount of motorcycles, any different turns that we're making.
Straight block.
So I guess, I mean, I'm not as familiar with Montpelier maybe as I should be.
It's like State Street is here, and one block over is Langdon Street. You have one bank building to go around. Yeah. So Tony,
hey team, let's discuss these details.
Consider it if it was safe.
Okay, I guess we would
another time.
We would consider, yes, if we could work it out with the police.
Great.
And such.
Okay, super. Thank you, Connor.
So,
Yep, go ahead, Connor.
No, totally agree with tabling. So the thought is the city would play a role in facilitating the discussion there.
We would
with
try
the
to
two
get.
parties.
We'll try to get the farmers market and like together. We met with them each separately before and talked to people, but I think we need to all be in the same room and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I just say one other thing?
Yes, sure.
I just want to say something that make this completely clear. The city of Montpelier 100% supports the toy run and always has. And this issue is not about trying to prevent it from happening. And I know there were people here in the past that thought the city was trying to shut it down, but that wasn't the case. And you may recall it was a unanimous vote to support it that year. The city is the only city on your route that actually spends money to have police out at overtime and use our DPW and everything else, and we will continue to do so. So I just don't want anyone to think that the city of Montpelier is in any way against the motorcycles. It's a wonderful event. The children are wonderful beneficiaries, and we do support that. The farmers market is also very important to our community. They are struggling farmers. They're part of the ethos of our community, and they help support our downtown 26 weekends a week. They bring people to help support our businesses, and they provide also an equally valued thing. What we were hoping for is that there is some way that we can accommodate you both. It is hopefully the farmers market will continue in the future, and hopefully the toy run will continue in the future. And it seems to me that we can find a solution, and it's got to be a safe solution. You're absolutely right, Holly, that we can't have motorcycles going where they're not, and I'm not sure about having a bunch of people on the street and them going by, so we need to work out safety concerns. But I'd ask everyone to take a deep breath, take a step back, and let's see if we can figure this out, because it's all good people here. And I do know, I'm not here to defend or speak for the farmers market, but I also know that logistically for them, it's also a huge big deal. They've got things to set down. They've got locations for farmers. They've got to bring trucks in to get their things up. It's just not, they can't change on the fly that well either. And so if we can figure out a way to plan and do this right, we can really be a good model for everybody.
Jack, and then I'd love to see maybe a motion on postponing. But
That's it.
oh, okay. Is there a motion to postpone this item? Oh, or did you have something else?
Just one short
Yep.
bit, which is just to say that as far as I can tell, this is still 2 months in the future nearly. It's the 10th. So I have every expectation that we will be able to work something out, either in terms of time adjustment or space adjustment. And then also, I just want to say, I'm sorry that I didn't notice that they were both scheduled for the same time. I do try to pay attention to that kind of thing, and they both are really important things. So, and can I maybe just go ahead and make a motion to table the thing at this point? So moved. So,
All right, so the motion is to postpone this item to a later date, to the next meeting, till after
2 weeks from tonight, June 26th.
Folks have had a chance to meet. All right, any further discussion? Oh, there was a second. I think Lauren seconded it. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so motion passes. Thank you all, and thanks for your attention to this issue. And now we can move on past the consent agenda. Okay. All right, so we are up to the Berlin Street speed limit public hearing. So before I forget, I'm going to officially open the public hearing. So there's, actually, I'm going to let either you or
Tom and Tony
Tom introduce it. Great. Welcome, Tom.
Good evening. Pull out my file. My glasses on. What's that?
We're not timing you.
Oh, yes, that'd be fine. Keep me on track here. So Tom McCardle, Director of Public Works. This is the consideration of a engineering traffic investigation to determine the appropriate speed limit on Berlin Street from Granite Street to the Berlin-Montpelier boundary. The recommended action is to consider the posted speed limit and the report. This is a two-hearing process, so asking that you approve first reading and set the date for the second reading if the majority of the council agrees that an alteration of the speed limit is warranted. This is a official action of City Council. It's in accordance with state statute establishing the legal speed of a public highway. The study that's presented is in accordance with the state statute, so I believe, as well as the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So I cited the statute, it's applicable. So we conducted initially conducted an investigation of Berlin Street in 2010 and reached some conclusions that the appropriate speed limit is 35 and conducted another investigation this year. The speed limits are established by a study to without a predetermined or conceived outcome. So what does the data lead us to? And we utilize I think 6 different factors and reaching that conclusion. So engineering judgment as well as actual tabular data. Notice that so I'll go through those briefly. There's the factor 1 with road surface and sight lines and alignment, width, other geometric aspects. Factor 2 is actual speeds, and I'll talk about that a little more, what that means, why that's a relevant factor. So roadside development or friction impacting the speeds and driver behavior. Factor 4 is the any specific areas of the roadway segment that may impact speed. Maybe an advisory speed is warranted, or is it more of a wide-ranging issue? 5 is the again the side friction, on-street parking, driveways, sidewalks, road shoulder, and 6 is the accident side of things. So speaking to the specific data, why the known as the 85th percentile speed, or the prevailing speed of free-flowing traffic is relevant, is the reason why that's generally given great weight is that this is an older thing I've got, but I'll read that. Majority of drivers respond in a safe and reasonable manner. The normally careful and competent action of a reasonable person should be considered legal. Laws are established for the protection of the public and the regulation of unreasonable behavior of the individual. And laws cannot be effectively enforced without the consent and voluntary compliance of the majority. So the majority of the drivers are looked at as 85% of the motorists will adhere to a speed that is appropriate for the actual conditions of the street, whether that is narrow, residential, wide, highway, and then respond accordingly. The misconceptions of speed zoning is speed limit signs will actually slow traffic, will decrease the accident rate. The posting of a speed limit will increase the speed of traffic if it's raised. So some studies that were done that about raising speeds and lowering them and how that actually affected driver behavior really had little effect. It's what actually is occurring on the roadway. So the advantage of realistic speed limits is satisfy the requirements of state law, invite public compliance by conforming to the behavior of majority by giving a clear reminder to non-conforming violators, and offer an effective enforcement tool to the police by clearly separating occasional violator from the reasonable majority. We want to try to reduce public antagonism toward police enforcement of obviously unrealistic or unreasonable regulations. So the conclusion reached in 2010 was based heavily, given a lot of weight based on the 85th percentile, reached the 35-mile-an-hour conclusion. Reviewing this, looking at other considerations, primarily the lack of continuous sidewalks, traffic volume is one thing that was considered as well. The functional conflict of a minor arterial road passing through a residential area, and number of driveways, crosswalks, lack of reported good compliance with crosswalk compliance with a lot of yield. So felt that the 35 miles an hour is somewhat excessive given the extenuating circumstances, so that we shouldn't rely entirely on the 85th percentile or looking at the pace speed. And there's some guidelines about that that I described in the report. Braking distance, other factors. So we feel that although 30 miles an hour may cause otherwise law-abiding citizens to be a higher percentage of the violations that we'd see on this street, I believe that the other factors affecting motorist behavior should be given greater weight, and that the posted speed should be reduced to 30 miles an hour. So I'm open to take questions and comments.
Thanks, Tom. I heard from a constituent today who raised the question. I mentioned to her that there was a proposal to reduce it to 30, and this person said, well, really, it should be reduced to 25, not 30, drawing the parallel to Main Street and College Street, which have certain similarities, although they're not identical. And I wonder if you would comment on that.
So again, we don't look at in the conducting of a traffic engineering study what the outcome should be or hope to be, and there's no basis of actual comparison unless there are true similarities in alignment, driveways, other factors. So the geometric conditions, the differences between Main Street, College Street, Northfield Street are, there's multiple. I mean, Berlin Street's 34 feet wide. There's a long continuous section, whereas College Street is multiple blocks and shorter segments. Again, a speed limit doesn't mean that the speed can be maintained for the entire length of the street. It's College Street. I'm not aware of a recent study done of College. It may show that that speed could be, by the 81st percentile, actually increased. So speed limits that are long established are, in fact, grandfathered. It's when a substantial alteration is made and revising that speed limit where it must be supported by the study. And I've been here for quite a while, and I don't remember ever having studied College Street. Or Main Street was revised, and that was probably 20 years ago, and that's another topic. But there are differences in width, alignment, grade, a lot of factors as identified in the report.
Okay, thanks.
Questions? And then we'll take some public comment. Don.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding that in order to go lower than the state, we need this engineering study to reduce the speed?
That's correct. The default is 35 miles an hour. If a town wishes to lower it below 35, it needs to be supported by a traffic engineering study.
So if we opted to make it more narrow and put a full bike lane there, and not just where the cars are or aren't, then would that help qualify it for 25?
It would warrant a follow-up study. May come to the same conclusion. It depends on how that impacts all the various factors, how it affected the conclusions that are reached in reviewing each of those. So,
because there are crosswalks there, and again, I see people not able to react quick enough when somebody steps into it.
Sure.
And likewise, when I'm trying to stay the speed limit, or actually between 30 and 35, people ride my bumper.
Yeah.
And having been hit by a car 25 miles an hour on a crosswalk, I feel we should really go for 25 on most of our residential streets. You've got cars coming in and out, and you've got people, and we're encouraging bicycles. So I would try to do whatever I could to that street to help it qualify for 25.
Yeah, so those alterations would need to be substantial enough that actually impacts motorist behavior. Again, 85% of the motorists are driving at a safe and appropriate speed based on the conditions and the environment. So the crosswalks, pedestrian activity, the bike lanes, the numerous studies have been done by Federal Highway about raising and lowering speed limits, but not so much about changing the actual physical characteristics of a roadway and how that affects driver behavior. So I suspect that would result in some behavioral changes and may lead to a conclusion that the speed limit should be lowered. But reducing it at this point under the current situation, you're more likely to have a significant amount of because it doesn't relate or connect with what motorist is actually seeing and experiencing, with optimal sight lines, wider road typical, there's driveways, but there's good sight lines to them. It's more likely that there's going to be a tremendous burden on the police department enforcing potentially an arbitrarily low speed limit. I think 30 is going to be require the police department to extend a considerable amount of effort to educate the public to reach the 30-mile-an-hour speed, because again, it really points to driver behavior and motorist behavior in these situations.
I don't want the motorist to dominate. And I was around, and I'm sure you were in the department when we renovated that road, and I thought the community, the neighborhood was promised that even though this street was being smoothed out, that it wasn't going to impact them. And yet the faster the speed does, because it is easy to go fast on that street. So I feel we shouldn't help it, and maybe that's one of those places we'll use the traffic calming, but I feel it's a neighborhood and it needs to be treated as such.
And I believe that's the reason why I reached the conclusion in discussing it with staff that the 2010 study should be reconsidered and that greater weight should be given to the residential setting and a minor arterial. So there's what we refer to as a functional conflict between the actual purpose and use of this roadway as a connecting commuter route with its service, its use also as a land access, property access in a residential setting. So that is why greater weight was given to the actual conflicts that occur. There are driveway, pedestrian, bicyclists. Those lanes have been added. We don't see an awful lot of pedestrian use up there. I believe there's probably just a lack of comfortable feeling that it's a good place to walk and be on a shoulder. So,
thank you.
Yep.
Connor, and then let's take some comments from the public.
Sure, just real quick. Any other speed studies being conducted at the moment, Tom, or anything you're watching?
Northfield Street will be reviewed. It was substantially reconstructed, bike lane also, sidewalk, so that will be reviewed once we have some data collected now that the dust is settled and the construction's gone away. It's important that no actual influences occur while you're collecting the data, and so that warrants a follow-up study. I don't know the schedule, whether it's this year or next year, but it will be soon.
All right, I know we have some folks from the public who would like to comment, so come on up. If you'd introduce yourself and say where you live.
Gene Leon, 265 Berlin Street. Thank you, Donna, for your comments and for finally bringing this to the table. I've been in the area coming to 3 years, and I might be more than 2 minutes because I'm also talking for a lot of people that couldn't make it here tonight.
Well, if you do, I'll let you know when you're at 2 minutes.
Sure.
And then,
My dad's been an engineer for 50 years, and he is a project city manager in Florida City, where school zones in Florida are actually 15 miles per hour. He is shocked that this neighborhood, which is a residential neighborhood in this day and age, when it was grandfathered in, when it was a rural farmland. Now it's communities with children, with families, with seniors, with a bike path, with pedestrian crosswalks, school bus stops, and public city bus stops. So why, for lack of a better word, discriminated Berlin Street? Northfield Street has the same pitch, uphill, 25 miles an hour, with less residents. Uphill Main Street, 25 miles an hour, same pitch, going uphill. Elm Street, which is typically enforced, 25 miles an hour. College Street, 25 miles an hour. I work on College Street and I've gotten to know a lot of the residents in that area. And their main complaint is when speeders are speeding at a 25-mile-an-hour zone, guess what they're doing? 35 miles an hour. When speeders are going fast in a 35-mile-an-hour zone, they're doing 45, 50. I invite all of you to sit in my driveway during any traffic hour, including yourself, because you said there's not a lot of families, there's not a lot of, I don't know we, because I have kids, and there's a lot of families and kids who are constantly moving in this neighborhood. I invite you all to sit in my driveway during traffic hour and see for yourself whether it's with a speed gun or just plowing in the winter, and you see how dangerous and unsafe it is. Talk about data. In 2016, there was an extensive data in Massachusetts in many of the urban areas. In 2017, after extensive studies, the 35-mile-per-hour zones were reduced to 20 miles per hour.
So I want to let you know you're at 2 minutes.
Okay.
So just think about.
Yeah, so after, does anyone know what the fatality rate is for doing 30 to 35 miles an hour? This is all data from a European study. it's 45%. The fatality rate, if someone was in an accident, hit someone, going 20 to 25 miles an hour is 5%. So these are factors. And now on behalf of Christy Sternbeck, that also lives off Burning Street, she agrees to the 25 mile an hour, and she's concerned that the flashing lights in the pedestrian crosswalks are not always visible or on, and that helps eliminate traffic. So, and I have, like, the best data is eyewitnesses, residents, citizens who live in this neighborhood. That is your best data, and a lot of us are here to speak, and I'll let them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vicki.
Vicki Lane, Berlin Street, and I've been there for 25 years, and this is not holding up. No, forget it. It's good enough. I can yell. That was an awfully nice letter to get in the mail. I was expecting bad news until I read it. Now, I would be really happy with 25 miles an hour, because I've asked that before, but I'll settle for 30, because that means they'll only go 40 versus 50. And maybe at 30, we won't be, our windows and things won't shatter from those ridiculous exhaust pipes and sound systems. Anyway, so I think this is great. As far as pedestrians go, I don't know where you live, but there's pedestrian traffic on Berlin Street on the sidewalks. The thing we don't have on Berlin Street is the other side of the street, because you're taking your life in your hands to walk across the street and visit your neighbor across the street. And when you're trying to clear your driveway of snow, it's a real challenge, particularly for those of us on the hill, because people just kind of slide down, and most of the time they're on their cell phones anyway. But so I think this is wonderful. I would encourage you, since we've now got these little flashing lights at these 2 pedestrian crosswalks downtown, that it is far more important to have them on the 2 crosswalks on Berlin Street, because people don't stop. They rev up that hill and they slide down, and if you're the unfortunate person to be in that crosswalk, too bad. So let's get some of those. That would be great. I think, though, in the outlying areas, those little flashing lights, I mean, granted, you have to push it, but eventually people will get educated. And as far as driving 30 and educating the public, they get behind me and they're going to get educated, because 30's it.
Thank you, Vicki.
25 at night.
Hi, everyone. James Brady. I live on Prospect Street. Actually, wasn't expecting to comment tonight, but here I am for the next agenda item. So I just I wanted to put an idea out there, which I don't know if has been brought up before, but it's what Burlington does, and go a citywide speed limit. And maybe this is completely unrealistic, but it might be easier to educate the public and have some more compliance if you know that if you're in Montpelier, you're going 25, obviously with exceptions, the interstate, some of the state routes. I don't know if that's been considered at all, or if that's something we might be thinking about. As a family who tries to use our car as the least amount as possible, Berlin Street, yes, I agree, it can be scary. And also, if there is low pedestrian use, I think that could actually be an argument in favor of kind of more thought, because drivers are less likely to be thinking about pedestrians, and so that interaction occurs less, so they're less likely to be on their mind. So just that's another factor. But I just wanted to bring up the idea of a potential citywide factor instead of trying to focus on little bits and pieces throughout the city. Just throwing that out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Lux, Montpelier. First, want to say that this 85% idea is really bizarre to me. And if that's a state rule, we have to change this, because, I mean, any kind of crime you could do, if 85% of people do it, it's okay. The other thing is, I'm new to town, and anytime I come down Berlin, I'm like, wow, look at that view. It's one of the most beautiful stretches in this town, and we treat it like a highway. I'm also looking for a place to buy, if anyone knows anything. And Berlin Street was on my list, but I'm reluctant because I want to be able to get to downtown on foot or bike. And it's really not safe. There are bike paths, but it is very risky to bike up Berlin Street, I can tell you that. And so it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. If the bicyclists are not comfortable to bike up Berlin, then the drivers feel like they can go as fast as they want because they've got the road. So saying that 85% of people drive 44 miles per hour and that should influence what the speed limit is a little silly. And so the other thing I want to mention is that I believe that area is seen by the city as kind of a growth zone where future development could take place. It's really not far from downtown. So if we don't make it possible to walk or bike there, we lose an opportunity, and there are people who consider those areas who would walk and bike to downtown. Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Mary Carol Dobbins. I live at 300 Berlin Street at the top of the hill at the corner of Sherwood Drive. And I can say from personal experience, this is a regular occurrence that I am blown away by how fast people drive by my home. They're coming off the hill from the Walmart and the hospital, and they make no regard whatsoever, have no regard whatsoever that it's a residential neighborhood. They've entered the city. They're in the city of Montpelier now. And I had 6 legislative pages stay with me from January to May of this year, and they're from around the state, and I can tell you that they all commented, along with their parents, that they were afraid on that street, and they were afraid to let their kids walk down to the State House. I hear this all the time. The family center is on Sherwood Drive. There are children and very young children and parents who have to use that road to access to get to the family center. We should encourage that and not scare them to death to get there. When I shovel my drive of snow or mow my grass, I have literally repeatedly been blown off balance by how fast the cars go by me. And I need to be able to access to take care of my property. And it's just ridiculous. And it is not an occasional occurrence. It is repeated. So again, it's our neighborhood. It is a beautiful street, and I appreciate your comments. And so many people live there. It's a large, active neighborhood. And if people are not walking it, it's because we're afraid to walk it. We would like to very much more often walk it. And so please protect our safety. We'd appreciate that. 25 miles per hour will be ignored to a certain extent. People will drive faster than that. Please keep it to 25, because as they go down a hill or come up a hill, they're going to accelerate some. And the police can understand that. If we keep it to 25, people can adjust their habits. They will. We do it all the time. And so we'd appreciate your consideration to please change the speed limit to 25. Thanks.
Welcome.
Hi, good evening. My name's Noah Sexton. My wife and I live on 200 Berlin Street. And I can tell you, Gene's correct. You know, I know all the data and everything. But cars zip by all the time. You know, we walk our dog every day, and it's just amazing how fast cars are going up and down. When we sometimes have had the flashing sign showing the speed, you know, you'll see 37, 40 miles an hour. So, and it is a residential area that's we've been there 4 years now, and you're having young families now with kids, the crosswalk. And it's really scary for the kids and everything and pedestrians going across. And like you say, we're part of the city. And I was thrilled when they said we're going to maybe drop the speed limit. And like you said, 30 is a start, 25 would be better. But really think we should drop the speed limit.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, speaking in my capacity as a resident at 209 Berlin, I can kind of agree with everything that everyone has said. One of the things I think is a major concern for me on my property at the corner of Berlin and Wilson is that there's a bus stop right there. And every single morning at 7:40, 7:45, families come down Wilson Street from the neighborhoods with little kids on the street, and there's no sense of anyone stopping for people in the crosswalk, particularly little kids going to the school bus. So reducing the speed limit, I understand the technical side of it, I get it, but you know what? Like in that neighborhood, I'm seeing so many kids these days. I've got 3, so you know, geez, I just jumped the population. But you know, it's really important because we do have a lot of people walking in the neighborhood, or would walk more if they had that opportunity. The sidewalks are narrow on that far side. You know, I would give up some of my property for sidewalks. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Tilley. I live at 276 Berlin Street. We've been there 52 years, and that's back when it was a paved road, but there was no traffic like there is today. A couple of my biggest problems, and I'm in favor of lowering it to 25. We live up at the top on the left-hand side of the road, just this side of the curve. And when I back out every morning, there's nothing coming that I can see on that curve. But by the time I get out into the road and into gear to start to go down, I've got someone right on my tail. And that's almost every single morning at 7:30. And in the wintertime, I had to stop mail delivery because I can't get across the road to shovel in daylight hours with the traffic going the way it is. It almost seems like some of them take pride in seeing how close they can come to you, because I'm out there trying to shovel and it just whiz, whiz, whiz. And I think they're going 40, 45 seems to be the normal, regardless of what the stats say. So just for that comment. Okay.
I'm Laura Smith-Riva. I live at 286 Berlin Street. I mentioned earlier, some folks probably have seen the sheep up there at the top of the hill. That's us. And it has been very shocking to see the traffic flow on that street and the speed. But the thing that I noticed that really was hard for me was the number of school-age children who are walking past my house, which is, I'd like to say too, I would offer up some land for sidewalks if there was anything left there, but there isn't. There's no sidewalk there. The sidewalk ends at Hebert Street, and kids are exiting the sidewalk onto what I guess is being called the bike lane, although it's hard to understand that concept given that area. So I don't understand how the city would want to have school-age children walking on that street with traffic flowing by there, you know, approaching speed limits of 50 miles an hour. It's unreal, honestly. The other thing I'd like to say is there is, when you get to the top of that hill, there is a curve there, and then you have Sherwood Street. And effectively what's been created there is a mechanism for people to bypass the Route 2 traffic during rush hour. And so they just come racing up Berlin Street and then drop down on Sherwood, which is a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. And they've had a lot of complaints, from what I can understand, from at least from reading Front Porch Forum, with the traffic speeding on that road to avoid, you know, hitting the roundabout over there on Route 2 to come back down that way, or they're going out to the Berry artery there. And so we've created this arterial highway in a residential neighborhood simply so that people can bypass the traffic down on Route 2 and effectively go faster than people are going on Route 2 half of the time. So it just seems like a real a not very good situation up there, but particularly for the kids. And I have watched people out there trying to shovel, you know, their driveways. You know, folks, there's a couple of my neighbors are elderly, and it's definitely a challenge. And we've been quite challenged to figure out what to do with the snow in our area. So I got one more minute. What do I want to say in 1 minute?
I was going to say, actually, I have you as...
Oh, she's saying stop. Okay.
I apologize.
So I will stop. I am in favor of reducing the speed limit. I understand. I read the study and the 85th percentile. I'm having a hard time with that. Maybe something's different between 2017 and now, but I'm in favor of reducing that speed limit and doing whatever we need to do to make that area motorist, to create awareness for motorists to slow down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Melissa Kasarek, and I live on Pleasant View Street, which is parallel to Berlin Street. And I didn't actually know that there was a proposal to reduce the speed until just tonight. I'm the mother of 2 small children, and my husband and I like to try and take advantage of downtown Montpelier as much as we can. And when the weather is nice, we like to try and take the stroller. Double strollers are not convenient vehicles, no matter how good the sidewalks are, but it's actually really difficult to manage to get into the crosswalk. It seems almost like it's a really tight corner. Hopefully we can keep them in the double stroller for a little bit longer, because, I mean, the alternative is having one in a stroller and trying to wrangle the other one on a very busy street. I also was not aware of the fact until very recently, I'm a somewhat new resident of Montpelier, that there were no buses after a certain point to school. I don't think I'm a very overprotective parent, but I could not imagine sending a small kid down Berlin Street to walk to the public schools every day. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do when I get to that point. I have a few more years to deal with it, but I think that reducing the speed on Berlin Street would certainly help with a lot of the issues.
Thank you. Let's see if there's anybody else, Vicki, who has not yet spoken.
I'll be very brief. I do not live on Berlin Street. I have no selfish interest in it. I travel Berlin Street frequently. I have to use cruise control to make sure I don't violate it. I've caught myself doing that. In fairness, I would encourage the 25 to be comparable to Elm and Northfield, that in effect you'll be retraining those in a hurry traffic people to find another route. But to protect, this shouldn't be a lesser grade neighborhood and treat it as such. I would encourage you to send them back to do it, come back with a 25 proposal.
Thanks.
Lauren Sales again. Just a couple quick things. The crosswalks, people warn new people in the neighborhood not to use them because unless the lights are flashing, it's like they're not even seen. It would be less dangerous if they weren't there because people are so conditioned to think it's safe to use a crosswalk. It's very scary. I've known multiple people who've grabbed people out of them. And the other thing I was wondering about is, you know, I actually got a couple of tickets quite a few years ago in that area. It's very open and going faster makes sense, and then without a lot of indication, you're suddenly in a residential area. And I think it suddenly becomes Montpelier. Isn't there a town line there? And I wondered if there, as part of the whole picture, if maybe there could be a welcome sign or something that had some psychological impact, that you're about to go around a corner and there will be children and houses and dogs, because the change does happen really quickly.
A little like reduce speed ahead kind of thing.
Yeah, or but not just that. Maybe welcome to Montpelier or something like that.
Great idea. Thank you. Nope. Before you go again, Vicki, I want to see if there's anyone else who has not spoken who would like to. All right, Vicki, you've already had 2 minutes, so is it super short?
Did I have a full 2 minutes?
No.
Oh, good. Are there flashing lights at those two crosswalks?
No,
I didn't think
yet.
so. Now I've forgotten. Crap.
Vicki, you can always. This is just the first public hearing. If you have more to say, why don't we save it for the next one? Okay.
Well, I'll remember eventually here. I do like the citywide 25-mile. I think Berry City does that too, so I don't see why we can't do that. I mean, that's a good thing.
Hey, so Vicki, I am gonna cut you off. You've had 2 minutes, and I'm gonna try to Is it really brief?
It's really brief.
It's really brief.
I just want to mention, as a new resident, I used the GPS to get around and find my way around, and it will actually send you up Berlin down Sherwood instead of River to 302 because it thinks it's the fastest route. So it's not just people who want to take a shortcut.
Okay. Thank you.
Believe me, it's not. It's the tractor trailer.
Well, I'm sure there's lots of.
I remembered just one thing.
Okay, let's save it for next time.
It
Vicky.
won't do it next time.
I'm sorry.
It won't go with next time.
You can send us an email. How about that? Like
I'll
we
put
need
it
to
front
keep.
porch forum.
There you go. We just need to
No problem.
keep going, and I want to be consistent, right? With folks. So, okay. So it seems pretty obvious that we're going to at least reduce it to 30. That seems pretty clear, and it also seems at least very interesting to me to reduce it to 25. But I want to clarify something with you, Tom. You said in order to change the speed limit, basically you need a study to support that. Is that more or less true?
That's correct.
Okay. So, I mean, I have a suggestion, but I don't want to cut other people off.
Well,
Yes.
I would just be really interested in researching the total 25 for the whole city, and less in some areas.
There,
If that makes.
if I could respond to
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I did have a couple of just follow-up comments, but the Montpelier does currently have a 25 mile an hour as overall speed limit unless otherwise posted. I don't think we sign it very well, and I just actually was looking at that and what's recommended on the manual. So that is currently in place and has been for a long time. No, I said unless otherwise posted. So that is currently to then change all the speed limits to less than 35 miles an hour if it's already posted at that does require by state statute the conducting a traffic and engineering study. It must be supported by that, or your tickets will be challenged, and you'll probably won't prevail in court when that is challenged. So the study has to be prepared. I'm less clear about whether council has the prerogative to deviate from the results of that. I believe you're allowed to. I can't change what I've concluded, but that is, I would have to find out, perhaps a legal question, whether or not a speed limit that is not supported by the study would still prevail. A couple of quick questions, if you don't mind,
Sure.
or answers. We are looking at the sidewalk extension from Hebert Road to Sherwood Drive. That will be designed, and a funding request for that will be possibly through a grant. On Sherwood Drive, when we repaved it last year, we altered drainage structures and in anticipation of a sidewalk on one side of Sherwood Drive from Berlin Street to Forest Drive. So we are working on those alterations. We realize the need for pedestrian connections and prefer not to have people walking the street. Would like to see more people walking. And last, the flashing lights on the crosswalks is in the works, and that's something that's being looked at by the Transportation Committee.
So something that seems clear to me as well from all the comments. By the way, Berlin Street, congratulations on having such great representation. That's excellent. I'm so impressed. It seems clear that the speed limit is even just one factor among many here. You know, it was brought up. What if there was a sign that gave people a visual or psychological cue that something was changing? I know there are other traffic calming measures that can be looked into. I mean, that might be street narrowing or adding a sidewalk, and I don't know what the possibilities are for that street, but now is probably not the time when we'll be able to figure that out, but it seems like it would be really worth looking into even other strategies to help reduce speeds, because I mean we can change the speed limit even to 25, and if that's not what people are doing, it still may not register with people, and people still it may still be normal for people to go excessively fast. So there
That's
need
right.
to be some other cues there to help, I think.
Agreed. There will be a reduced speed ahead sign on the approach from Berlin, so I'm sorry I didn't mention that. I think the idea of a welcome to Montpelier sign is a very good idea.
And if we were to, so I'm very interested if we can look into this legal question about whether the council has jurisdiction to deviate from the recommendation. Perhaps we do. That would be wonderful to know. If we are not, then I think it would also be interesting to look into, sort of as Donna, you were sort of suggesting that maybe if we do some of these other strategies, that 30 might be what we do for now, and then we implement some of these other strategies and then take a look at it again, and the report may then come back recommending 25. So that's at least that's how it could play out, unless of course we have other authority. Yeah.
Well, and just in case everyone else doesn't know, the Montpelier Transportation Infrastructure Committee has been looking at a traffic calming policy, which offers many different ways, and they could take on this street as an example of applying the policy that the city has adopted.
That would be excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
So you have a first reading, you have another one in 2 weeks, and we can look at some of these, some feedback
Okay.
for 2 weeks.
Great. Is it brief? Because there's another hearing. There's a whole other hearing.
The problem is, so let's wait, let's do 30 now, wait another 2 years. People want this now. I mean, this not continue to, regardless of your inconclusive data, in my opinion. I mean, there's no police data here. I mean, there's no enforcement. So there's no, where the traffic citation data. I mean, we don't have that. The people I could get a petition for over 500 people in this area if necessary. The city has an obligation to keep citizens safe. Yes or no? So the council has the power to make a citywide 25, that's an amazing proposal, 25 mile per hour, citywide. You guys have the power. You have been voted by the citizens that live here. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. So I think we have some things to investigate for next time, so I don't know that we need to alter anything substantially at this point, but we'll have another reading on this to revisit this in 2 weeks.
Can I?
Hang on, Donna, did you have something?
Do you need a motion to close the hearing?
No, I
think
said it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gonna. Is it very?
Very brief.
Yeah.
Can I recommend that you ask PD to do strict enforcement to actually build some data between the two hearings?
Well, we can dig up some data. How about that?
Well, I mean, strict enforcement would. All right.
Okay.
Mine is real quick.
It's real quick. Okay, go ahead, Vicki. And then I'm
There's
going to
already
close the
been a
public hearing.
precedent.
Okay. That's
Speaking of Sherwood Drive, can you repaint the yellow line on Sherwood Drive so people understand that it is a two-way street? A lot of people seem to think Sherwood Drive, they can drive straight up the middle or down the middle.
Repaint a center line?
The yellow, whatever color that is, the center line. So they know it's a double. There's 2 lanes on that street because it's...
I'm going to say that's probably a question for another
But
time.
I mean, that's just my suggestion.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing. And Connor, and then I think we need a motion to have our second hearing, unless you want to do that.
No, I think there's consensus to move in this direction, so that I'd move to approve the first reading and set the date of the second reading to June 28th? 6th.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I just want to comment, Tom, I really appreciate your lengthy memo that lays out all the 6 standards. It was very helpful. Okay, so it has been about an hour and a half. Do you want to break, team? Yes. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back with the Conservation Commission.
She's good.
So we are up to the Conservation Commission update. Yay, welcome. If you would introduce yourselves.
Great. I'm James Brady, current chair of the Conservation Commission.
Paige Gerton, Conservation Commission member.
And I'm Michael Zorchak.
Also a member. I just wanted to say, so on a personal note, my term is up this month, and I will not be asking to renew. It's been 4.5 years, and it's a tough decision. We have a lot. I'm just kind of looking back at the notes, or even just the last year, and there's a lot of really amazing things going on. But with personal life and just kind of knowing when I want to get to the point where I get kicked off. So I was just kind of like, okay, this seems like a good time. So you know, getting a little tired. Been there 4.5 years, so I think it'd be good to kind of give somebody, kind of empower somebody new to kind of take over the reins. And as you'll see, we have a lot of really cool things going on for somebody to and the rest of the group to sink their teeth into. So we're thinking just kind of going over what some of our highlights were in the last year since we last met with you, and there has been quite a bit, which is awesome. And then I'll let Michael and Paige weigh in on some of the details of our, more particularly our stormwater project, which has gotten a lot of traction lately, a lot of excitement, even some news just from earlier today. So we, one of our big events of the year, we were able to co-host the Bio Blitz with North Branch Nature Center, and it was awesome. It was a total success. You know, there's 600 plus participants, people driving from, I think, all parts of the country to offer their expertise, thousands of observations, and it was really inspiring, and we were really excited to be able to co-host and help use some of our funding to support some of the what was needed for that event. And not only that, we got some incredible data that few other cities, especially cities of our size, that get in terms of present, ecological baseline that we can use to inform us in the future. So it was like basically hiring 500 consultants for one day. So it was incredible. We're really excited about how that went, and all the data's online, and it was the second one in 10 years, so there might be events like it in the future. But so that was an incredible success. I'd like to jump right into the stormwater topics that we've been focusing on. And as a Conservation Commission, we sat down about 2 years ago to decide what makes sense for our size, our scope, the city, and stormwater rose to the top pretty easily. We have a lot, an urban compact in a confluence of multiple rivers, and a stormwater issue that goes all the way to the lake. So that was the top of our priority, and Paige and Michael kind of took that and ran as fast as they could, and have been doing that for 1.5 years now. So please, Paige, take it away.
Okay. Michael and Jamie Bates and I have been working on a rainwater collaboration, a stormwater collaboration with the credit union to build a rain garden on their property to infiltrate water from about a quarter of their parking lot, and the rest of them are another plan for future.
It's the same place, credit union.
Yes, and so in the fall we put together a grant, and we got a grant allocated to do that. That happened in November. The credit unions all over it. They think it's a great idea. They really want to reduce their impact. I've been very impressed working with them. And so slowly we've gotten all the bits and pieces together, and we finally, about 2 weeks ago, got the official grant documents from the funding agency, and sent out an RFP to about 10 companies. And as of today, today's the due date, as of today, I have at least 4 proposals that I've seen so far. I haven't read any of them, but that's really exciting because I wasn't sure we were going to. Some of them came out of the blue. It was on the city website, and we worked with a professor from UVM named Mark Companion, who is also, which Michael got in touch with, who also is involved with the Clean Water Initiative at the state and the Sea Grant program, which is part of the funding agency. So, so that's proceeding slowly, but we're getting there, and that hopefully this will be a template for future projects, public-private collaborations that we can do in support of the city stormwater master plan. So that's the goal, and it's happening.
Great. Yeah. Any questions on that topic?
Comments? Okay.
Questions?
Anyway, we're really excited about that. It's going to be kind of a high-profile site with the bike path, so a lot of education
And the
and
high
outreach
school, and
opportunities. Yeah.
it's right on Bailey Avenue, so it'll be really visible.
Yeah.
It's going to be really exciting.
And we're going to have a party.
Excellent.
A cleaning party every year to make sure it's functioning correctly. So yeah, so that's just the first of our stormwater projects. So the hope is to kind of use the city's stormwater master plan as a way of guiding Conservation Commission to either A, help Public Works, or B, help other foundations, or C, kind of picking away at some of these smaller ones that might even be just, you know, the lower hanging fruit that we could do without so much support. So yeah, so thanks to everybody.
Hopefully this will be a template for how we can do it or how we can not do it next time. So
yeah,
it's a start.
So
it's a whole new thing for me.
So moving on, over the past year, we also finished up some of our projects related to vernal pools, and one of them was as simple as just completing fencing around one of the pools in Hubbard Park, wire fencing. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, apologize. So fencing around one of the vernal pools near the structures at Hubbard Park, and basically what that means is occasionally a dog would get in there and there'd be silting or other or predatory actions from you know natural so anyway, so that was a very simple project, but it's very effective, and that pool has been very productive even just this spring. So that was a simple project but very successful. And when John Jose was a commission member, he helped use our city with our really good baseline data on vernal pools to help do a proof of concept for a model that the UVM Spatial Analysis Lab, along with the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, has been working on to predict vernal pool locations throughout the state using existing mapping. So LiDAR, if you're not familiar with that, you know, 3D imagery, basically. And so we had the data and we had a little bit of funding, so we were able to use that funding to get a consultant to run the model, and the model hit existing vernal pools. So it proved the model was working correctly, and it was really exciting for both parties, and now we have another data set that we're excited to have in our tool belt.
Science.
Yeah, science, and
Science.
it was cheap and easy, and so we were really excited about that project. We've been involved with the public outreach and kind of thoughts and concerns of Confluence Park, and so we've been really happy to partner with the River Conservancy on that project. We helped use one of our meetings for their public outreach, which was really successful. That was a lot of fun, and then so we're definitely excited to continue with that process in the future, because that's going to be I think a real gem for the city as we start to finally focus back in on the rivers. So that's a high priority for us, and we're really excited about how that's going. So another success from last year. So one of the other topics that has been high on our list of priorities has been outreach and education, and it's been a slightly harder nut to crack just because of time and energy from already busy volunteer staff. So that's something hopefully we can kind of continue to evolve. And a few things that did go on were I think Paige, and I don't know if Jamie went to, but there was some participation at the farmers market, at least once
Yep,
last
I went
year.
once.
Yeah, so
I
just to
was-
start,
we
you
were
know, just
hoping
to,
to do that more,
but we now have a logo, which we're also very excited about, and so that kind of having that presence, and we were able to use that logo, for instance.
Bring us a copy?
Oh, it can get you in any form. Yeah, we can send you a link to it. But we were able to use that logo at the Bio Blitz, so that was a good way of kind of debuting and kind of getting that recognition out beyond the core group. So that was one of the ways to kind of start the outreach portion of our priority. So that's something we're going to have to kind of work on to evolve as things go on. And then the next kind of big item that we started to sink our teeth into recently was our participation for projects that require Conservation Commission review for the new zoning. And we are not planners, so it was, hey, we're really excited about this language in here, but what does it actually mean kind of deal. And so we started to have some folks from the city, the planning office, and the DRB come, and they spoke with us recently, and it became clear that process, even if we don't participate very often, we have to get our ducks in a row, and there's going to be quite a bit of work for us to do that. And so that kind of brings me to one of the biggest points I wanted to bring up to the council is we're really interested in and want to kind of get some more insight on how the Conservation Commission could get more formal and more regular staff support as we continue on, because our projects as they evolve, as this is just from 1 year, they can get unwieldy pretty quickly, and it's not that we can't handle it, but if we had some support from even just some administrative support or some guidance for internal communications, I think that this group would be taken to the next level. So I understand that there might be some staff changes going on throughout. So whoever that, I understand that some other committees and groups have a dedicated person that can offer at least a few hours of their paid time to help. So I'm just curious to see if we could flesh that out a little bit better moving forward for this group to kind of continue on this growth to make it successful. So I wanted to make sure that was mentioned and brought up, because like I said, we're continuing to grow. We're taking on bigger and bigger projects that are getting really great traction, and we want to continue to be successful without burning people out. So but thank you for letting us kind of talk about our year in review and what we're looking at in the future. I think coming up, it's going to be a slight continuation. The stormwater project is going to take up quite a bit of time, which is not a bad thing. I think it's going to make sure it's successful, we're going to have to make sure that the time and effort is put in there to make sure that is done on in a good time frame, and also that's going to start to include more people. For instance, maybe more student involvement for the high school, which is right across the street. We have 2 student members right now, which is awesome. A 5th grader, Jasper, and a high school student, Ian, which has been awesome. So having liaisons through the schools, through them, gives us an easy conduit to kind of involve even more of the student population. And then we have a nice project that they can get their hands literally dirty on. So that's really exciting. So yeah, so thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments or
Any questions?
Donna.
Well, it's not a question, but thank you for your service, James.
Oh, thank you.
And you too, Paige and Mike, and your whole group. And I'm glad that you're getting more out there, letting us know what you're doing, so we can appreciate you as well as maybe give you some challenges along the way.
Great. Thank you so much, Donna.
Probably would have reappointed you too.
Maybe in a couple of years I'll.
When I have 15.
Yeah, right.
I was going to say we can first of all, thank you as well, but we can follow up, you and I, about what your staff needs are. and
Thank
see
you.
what's
Yeah,
feasible.
and I understand there are a lot of constraints already.
See what you
Everybody's
need.
running thin, so totally understand that. But
And thank you for the reminder about the youth participants. I want to make sure that we're on track to find more youth to be represented on boards again for the following year.
it's great.
Also,
And
thank you.
yeah, I was able to write a letter of recommendation for former members, and it's just awesome. Yeah,
That's really cool.
totally awesome. So thank you.
Any further, Glenn?
Just a very casual question for anyone who might not know what Vernal Pools produce. You said that the one in Hubbard Park was very productive. I
Oh,
just wonder
good point.
What was it producing?
It was wood frogs, and I think that there are spotted salamanders in that particular pool. And so vernal pool, it's ephemeral, dries up, and that's important because that way fish can't establish. And so it's a pool that's wet long enough to support the phases from egg to larvae to a full adult that can walk out of the pool, but then dry out. So it's a very specific window, and it's very rare, and that's why even if they're very small, they have the highest protection for the state wetlands. Oh, not the highest, but they're regulated as if they're a significantly larger wetland. And so, yeah, they're incredibly important even for their size.
They might not dry out this year. The fish may
Yeah.
start moving in.
Yeah, right. And that's how things were, It's a...
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you all for your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we are now up to the validation resolution, item 8. We had at one point anticipated going into an executive session. I don't think we will likely do that. So this was a postponement from the last meeting. We had a letter from James Dumont and representing the appellants, sort of in a late sort of hour last time, and so we decided to postpone, and also had a response from our lawyer. And so we have read through both of those letters, or James Dumont's letter as well as our lawyer's response, and so I think we might have a motion. I'm not sure, but go ahead.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we approve validation resolution.
I'll second.
Further discussion. Now, I'm sure there is discussion that people would like to have on this. So because this is a postponement, we've already taken a lot of comments on this last time. I would ask that if anyone wants to make any further comments today, that they be new, considering that we heard all your comments last time, and we've also read through all the written materials that were submitted to us. So if you have anything to say, if you would keep it to only new information or new material, as well as that which is only pertaining to the item at hand, which is the validation of the date of the warning, as well as the itemization of funds. That is what this resolution is about. I don't know, Paul Giuliani, it looks like you're wanting to come up and say something. If you would like to, if you have anything new or additional to add, that is also fine.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. After the, for the record, Paul Giuliani, representing the city of Montpelier.
You may want to pull one of the mics towards you. Yeah.
After the postponement at the last city council meeting on this, is that better?
That's great.
City manager contacted me and asked me to analyze the situation, make a conclusion, and render an opinion on the law as it applies to this set of facts, which I've done, and I'm glad to share with the council. And I think it's important in this discussion for the council to understand the context in which your deliberations are taking place. In Vermont, as in every other state in the United States, there's a strong, almost irrevocable presumption of validity and regularity that attaches to municipal meetings, to the vote, to electoral action, to votes on municipal matters, as well as to actions taken by legislative bodies such as yourself.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Are you just going through your opinion to us that you've already?
No,
this is new.
all I'm
Okay.
doing, I would like to do is just reiterate or focus on a couple things that were in my memo of March, which I think came up at the last meeting, which I think need a little clarification.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
The point is that the law in Vermont, as in other jurisdictions, attaches a great deal of significance to the effect and the legal effect of municipal meetings. In Vermont, that expression of interest or concern, if you will, is evidenced by the statutes that are cited in my memo and a fairly recent Vermont Supreme Court decision involving the city of Montpelier. And what it comes down to is that this presumption of validity and regularity that attaches to municipal meetings has with it an extremely high burden of proof, a burden of going forward to either challenge or invalidate or contest in any way the action taken at a municipal meeting. Under our statutes, that contest has to be initiated within 15 days of the vote. That never occurred with the November meeting on this particular bond election, nor was there any petition filed seeking reconsideration or rescission of that vote. So we fast forward to today, where the question has come up, or issue has come up. There's some irregularities in not the warning itself for the meeting or the conduct of the meeting. The statute says that certain information needed to be given or imparted prior to the vote. And there was, beyond a good faith attempt to comply with that statute, it was an immense attempt. But the statute is complicated. The regulations that are under the TIF statute leave a lot to be desired. And there's some question as to whether all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. So that's a legitimate question, a legitimate concern. But again, the legislature has stepped in and said, here's how you fix the problem. You go back to the city council or the legislative body, you identify where the glitches, or to use our Supreme Court's characterization, the irregularities exist, and you pass a validation resolution under one or both statutes. And the statutes, by their terms, validate and confirm and regularize that original election as if these irregularities never occurred. It's a totally curative statute. There's similar enactments all over the country. I don't pretend to know about them. In Vermont, these validation statutes are used with some frequency because things happen. Something slips between the cracks. The statute uses the word inadvertence. Well, people make mistakes, but thank goodness the legislature has seen a way to fix the problem. Now, that as background leads me to my opinion or my conclusion that the city council, this city council, if it feels appropriate to move forward to take advantage of the validation statutes, to ratify and confirm what happened at the special meeting back in November, in my opinion, you folks are on very, very solid ground to do so. The decision is yours, obviously, but if I could leave you with a thought, is that it's not up to you as a city council to defend or justify what happened in November. Those actions are presumed valid. If somebody wishes to contest or object, there's a process for that. Whether it's been followed or not, I'm not prepared to answer. But the point is that, again, in my opinion, you folks are on very solid ground entertaining this validation resolution and acting on it.
Thank you very much. If anyone has anything that is new to offer and pertaining to the date adjustment or the itemization of funds, now is the time.
Sandy Vitztune, 14 Loomis Street. New information. There were 2 articles published in Vermont Digger after the last discussion publicly on this topic. I wanted to make sure that councilors are aware of that. And the reason why is there are several similarities between the St. Albans project and Montpelier situation. I want to make sure that you're aware of that. The garages are both for about 400 spaces. They lease some portion.
Sandy, is this about the date or the itemization of funds?
It is.
Okay.
The Hampton Inn is a benefiting project immediately adjacent to the garage. The consultant was Burke and White. One of my questions, and is related, is what was the process that the city went through when they retained Burke and White? I'm concerned about Burke and White's advising to the city about numerous parts of the TIF plan, as well as afterwards any advice they may have given for the warning and getting the project going. Was there a bid process? How was Burke and White chosen? Were any other firms actually interviewed? Because St. Albans did consider borrowing to pay down their debt. This is important because Bill did clarify that Montpelier is not doing that, but the city did consider doing that, and that was around the time that taxpayers were told that they would not have to pay for the garage. Also, there is this confusion about whether the garage was taxable, and Montpelier has, following Mr. Giuliani's advice, that it is not. Again, that does impact the taxpayers. And thirdly, St. Albans seems to have also had some validation issues as well.
So does the taxability issue relate to either of those topics? Either the
yes,
date or
because if it is taxed, it affects the pro forma, and the city's having whether it's going to affect my mill rate. Sue Print wrote the second article, and she pointed out.
So you know you're at a little over 2 minutes.
So she points out that the St. Albans voters had little chance but to rely on the guidance of their paid city managers and other professionals, that they could not be expected to understand how the TIF statute works or the repayment terms. I really do hope the councilors take time to understand this if they haven't already read this. I'm submitting this information, I guess, to
Great. Thank you.
To John Odom. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay.
I have a comment.
Okay.
I want to caution again, the council appears to be doubling down. If there's somewhat of an acknowledgement, it sounds like Giuliani is admitting mistakes were made, and rather than let these appeals play out, we're going to double down and try to barrel through, which is what I warned you about before the vote was ever taken, that in effect you're further dividing the community, and there was a quote in one of the articles referenced in Digger that, and I'm sure it was in a bit of pique, but if these decisions are vulnerable to appeals and actions by parties that don't have proper standing, it's really not for our city staff to be deciding who has standing and who doesn't here. So I think we've got this think we need to.
Stephen, this should pertain to either the date or the itemization of funds. Okay, any further comments? All right, so if there's no further comments, we have a motion and a second about this validation resolution. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so the motion passes, and we are going to move on. Thank you. Okay, so the Alternative Transportation Fund budget. I am pretty excited to talk about that. So I'm sure there are, oh, yep, so Corey is here. Awesome, welcome.
I don't think we have any staffers with us, or committee members with us this evening. You're stuck with Kevin and I? Yeah. So we had circulated the proposed multi-year spending plan for the alternative transportation funds with a brief description of everything listed. I wasn't going to go through line by line. I did just want to give a brief overview. In the past, these funds have been, committees really tried to utilize both other matching grant funds and opportunities where other projects are happening to kind of further the Montpelier in Motion plan. And I think they've put together a plan here that does that. I know there's some items that they had gone kind of back and forth on, but you know, all in all, I think it's a pretty responsible plan. You know, one other focus point is when it comes to planning studies and implementing those planning studies, and not just planning studies, but other things like the traffic calming policy that's being developed. It's not just about funding the development of those plans and programs. It's making sure something is there at the end to help implement it. I think that's been a focus of theirs. You know, discussion.
Questions, Jack?
Not a question, but a comment. I was at the Transportation Committee meeting at which this was developed, and I can confirm that members of the committee really went through this line by line, made choices for what made sense, what didn't make sense, what items or expenditures we could defer in order to get to the things that we really wanted to do. We did some changing around of sidewalk gap planning, for instance, and the question I had was whether how the city would accommodate the issue of not devoting as much money to some of the planning as had been requested. I understand from the comments tonight that the city can live with it and find the money elsewhere for their planning, and so I think we should just adopt this budget.
Kevin, do you have something to add?
I do. So the planning department had requested approximately $44,750 from the Alternative Transportation Fund for the downtown master plan as a part of the a number of pieces as part of the Rialto Street Bridge, which we got a $23,000 grant for. We've got $6,000 to do stormwater modeling. We need that additional money to pay for that contract, and that request was under the guise that this type of kind of comprehensive downtown planning is ideally suited for this type of thing. We're looking at you know, bike and pedestrian issues and how they conflict, how we want to use that space downtown, where we're going to put city benches, how we incorporate the planning that has been done before, like the main Berry Street scoping study. And this is the key piece to get implementation funds. So we're going to be looking at stormwater, and we're going to be looking at those other pieces. So I understand that the committee did good work, and if there is another source of funding, it's fantastic. But I just wanted to put that out there, is that I do believe that this would be an appropriate use of these funds.
Donna.
I missed the meeting in June, but in May when we talked about it, we had a compromise with around $30,000 for the streetscape master plan. So what happened last Tuesday that we lost $20,000 on that line item?
I think the main thing was when we had taken that straw poll, we weren't really looking, or the committee really wasn't looking at the hard numbers at the time. I think it was more of a, yeah, we want to fund this to a point. And then when they started looking at potential projects, that other projects that could be funded, it started to go down and down.
Yeah, I'm disappointed, I must say. I'm disappointed.
I think it's competition between planning money and expenditures on concrete measures that are ready to be implemented right now and out over the next 3 years. So there we are.
Yeah, I'm just psyched to have a plan for this money over the next 3 years. You know, after not really having a plan for.
We gave you a 5-year plan.
Oh, fair enough.
And then a 3-year plan. We went 5 years, then 3, and then
forgotten.
So I'm sorry, we've had
No,
a
you're good.
clear
Yeah.
budget,
You're good.
and every
We
year
come back every
I had
year.
forgotten.
And every year we have unspent money. And so I was really for the streetscape so that we could have something that we could implement with our future money. And so I'm still advocating for more money for the streetscape master plan.
So I'm not familiar, I'm afraid to say, where the other money's coming from for the master plan. Do we have any idea? You said you understood that was solved?
Yeah, like.
I don't have any idea. What I meant by that was that I wouldn't have been surprised if the city staff had come to us. You know, we've got a recommendation to approve the budget. I wouldn't have been surprised if the recommendation had been, don't do what the committee said, but in fact realign the budget to provide more to the streetscape master plan. So that,
but we don't
that's
usually
where I
try to undermine our committees that way.
Well, I appreciate that.
No, and I don't think it would have been, I don't think they would have been surprised either, because they know this item is out there, and they understand the importance of it.
And I just wanted to put out there too is that I think that, you know, one of the pieces that comes through this is that with this comprehensive downtown plan, this is going to be the piece that gives us leverage to additional pieces. So one of the pieces that we're doing that was an add-on is a stormwater modeling piece. So when we look at what the options are, we can say, okay, if we install 18 rain gardens along this street, it will reduce the total impacts on the river by X. When we have those numbers, when we go to apply for like an ERP grant, you know, they're going to say, okay, we have a concrete number that we can look at. So I would just kind of encourage the council, and not necessarily against the committee, but you know, to look at this and say that you know, it's got to come from somewhere. So it is an expense, and whether or not you want to take it from this or somewhere else.
Glenn.
Thanks. I think I was at the May meeting too, and then I haven't been since then. I guess I'm curious to hear, because I think that the streetscape master plan is a really strong priority for me, certainly, and I love all the things that we're planning to do with this money as laid out in the proposal here, but can you speak more specifically about what the streetscape master plan can do for now with $10,000 and where we might look beyond
we
that?
Could
really
call
nothing.
the consultant.
So
no.
if we go ahead with this, then the streetscape master plan is basically tabled for now.
No.
No.
Word yet.
No. Yeah. We have a contract.
We just have to find the money somewhere else.
Yes, we have to find the money. Whether it comes from here or somewhere else, the money is going to be spent.
So then, and maybe this question is premature, but Bill, any ideas about where that money might come from, if not from?
Not off the top of my head,
Okay.
no, but we'll be reviewing it tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at this, you know, and as much time as we've spent on the covered bike parking, there really isn't a lot of support for it, and $5,500 is not going to cover it. That's just the material. It's no labor to install it. So I'm looking there and saying, why can't we use that piece? And then there's the one on, is it one of some of the sidewalks that weren't there before? And is Main Street Barry taking the full 50, Corey?
That's the estimate that's in the report right now, yes. I don't have any further numbers than that, but that is what...
I thought this was the estimate's going to get closer as we're getting almost to the end of it.
No,
Okay.
no, that'll be the number at the end of this. They won't change that number much, if at all.
Oh, okay.
My inclination here is to leave this as is, unless others have ideas as to how we, specifics as to how we want to change it. But before we consider that, comes from the public.
Peter Lux, Montpelier. I was privileged to be an observer at the budget meeting, and I want to thank the committee members for their hard work. They were very diligent and responsible to put together the budget. The thing that concerned me a little bit during the meeting was that it seemed that not all the committee members were fully informed on how the pieces connect together. And I know the city is doing really amazing and awesome work on strategic planning, master planning, and what the priorities should be for the city. And I didn't hear the decisions really roll up to those priorities necessarily, or the principles that the city is trying to put forward. And so my heart did go out to the committee members who had to decide whether or not they have 2 or 3 beacons to keep pedestrians safe, or put a sidewalk here to keep people safe. And so the fundamental issue is that maybe their budget isn't big enough. But beyond that, I think also it should be a primary principle to look at whether the line items help people drive less. And I think in this discussion, someone needs to say the word climate change, because this is really what people in this community care about, is that we want people to drive less. And there was one particular line item that it's not a bad line item, a sidewalk on Hubbard, but it does not get people out of their cars. It does not fundamentally change whether or not people can walk there or bike there. There is a sidewalk on one side. So I wonder why that one went in and other items don't make it. And as you know, I'm looking for a place to live. Murray Hill condos are out because I want to be able to walk to town. I cannot walk from there. Berlin Street is questionable. There's a lot of other places. And so this is also a housing issue partially. There is a housing shortage in town. And I talk to more and more people who are actually moving to Barrie. So what are we doing to make the connection to Barrie better in terms of bike paths or other connections like that? So I don't want to negotiate the budget here, but I do think that it's important for committees to have the full picture. And when organizations typically decide on priorities, they have a list. And that list will say why it's a priority, how it fits into the bigger planning, and then there's like a line, and what makes it above the line and below the line is decided on the current priorities of the city. And one of the changes since the Montpelier motion plan is that we will now have a bike path to more or less the roundabout at 302. So that could connect to Sherwood Drive, for example. So those kind of discussions, I think, should be part of the budget planning, and I didn't feel that that was actually the case.
Well, thank you for raising the issue of climate change in this the context of this conversation. That's absolutely important and in part what motivated this money in the first place. Jack.
I'll show you how you can walk down to the city from Murray Hill and go right through my yard. But the Hubbard Street sidewalk, the proposal as it came to us was to put the money into the College Street gap where there's sidewalk on only one side, and we decided to put the money onto Hubbard Street instead because that's where kids at Union School might be using the sidewalk, and that seemed like we would contribute more toward pedestrian safety than doing College Street at this point. You'll notice, Donna, that this plan over the next 3 years really spends up almost all the money, which
Oh yeah, we budgeted
we're
every year.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
So right now we're entering fiscal 20 with a $128,000 carry forward. If this gets spent the way it's anticipated, we're going to be not at zero but close to zero for a couple of years.
Yeah, the budgets always show expenditures. We just don't end up spending.
Okay.
Just another addition to the Hubbard Street sidewalk. That was another opportunistic item with work taking place on that street next year. It's scheduled to be resurfaced. There is a retaining wall along there that is going to be rebuilt. So that was a coordination effort with ongoing city project. But it was a topic. Just what Peter said was there is sidewalk on the other side of the street, and how do we prioritize those situations? So yes, it was that those same points were brought up when going over this.
What year is the Hubbard Street sidewalk planned for?
This year. This year.
Glenn.
Thanks. I'm glad to hear about the Hubbard Street thing. I also wanted to recall Tom McArdle said earlier this evening that there is a plan to extend the sidewalk on Berlin Street, I believe, out to Sherwood Drive. And the thing I missed in that comment was when that might happen or how far out that might be. Do we have an idea how long out that is?
Yeah, we last year we applied for a grant to construct that sidewalk. We didn't get it, so now we're on to kind of Plan B, and it's a multi-year in-house project. It is a pretty long distance, so I don't think our crews would be able to complete it over 1 year. It may take a couple of years, but that is the plan, to do it in-house.
So basically starting something like the next fiscal year, if we can get the grant, and extending more than 1 year before it's completed, is that?
No, the grant is no longer.
Oh, I see.
It's just in-house force
okay.
account work.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't understand. Okay.
Any further public comment? Okay, is there a motion regarding the multi-year budget for the Alternative Transportation Fund?
I move we adopt it as proposed.
A second.
Further discussion? Okay. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Nay. You're gonna have to vote.
I am going to vote aye. I don't often get to vote. There we go. Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough.
I knew you would.
Yeah, it's all good. All right, so the motion carries. And thank you. Thank you for your work on this. Okay, so the winter operations debrief. Also, I just want to make a note. It is 9 o'clock. I anticipate that we may not. I don't know. It depends on if the ordinance items are fast, or we jettison them.
Do you want to get a weather report on that now?
Yeah. I think it could be fast.
I think both of them are fast based on my review. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're not going to jettison them then.
We don't have our detailed people.
That's right. Okay. Awesome. Welcome. again, thank you for being
We'll be a lot faster than this winter seemed.
I hope so.
This is Brian Tuttle, our superintendent, and Tom McCardle. Don't see an awful lot of Brian, so he's usually out leading the charge for our work out in the field. So good to have him. So the reason for this debrief, I believe I did one last year as well, is the significance of the winter and the impacts that we all saw and felt while we're out doing the work. Everybody's seeing it and feeling it. So it was a wanted to remember, try to forget kind of winter. It was a challenging one. Ice, snow, freeze, thaw. You've read the report, so I won't go over all the details. It's that the city has its topographical and development patterns that lead to a lot of the difficulty in managing it. I think overall we did a good job under the circumstances, and I'm proud of our crew for hanging in there with us on long nights and weekends and holidays. But looking at these types of challenges, not terribly unusual. Like to see less rain following storms, but it's a learning experience, and we try to reflect on that. What went well, what didn't. Even talked to Barry City how they did their work. We were getting some comparisons with us, and when I spoke with them, with their public works director, he said, "Well, I've been hearing that Montpelier is doing a better job than we are." So it's all in the perspectives we have and the streets we live on, what people are seeing.
I love that comment in your report, sorry to interrupt, about people in Barry are getting the comment that Montpelier is doing it better.
That's not what I heard.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Montpelier says Barry's doing it better, Barry says Montpelier's doing it. Anyway, just good perspective.
Yeah, I
there,
think so.
right?
Yeah, that was helpful speaking with him about that. Somebody suggested I do that, and I thought it was a good idea, so appreciate that. So I'll talk about that a little more. The things that we've learned and the changes that we're considering is how we address the snowbank removal. How frequently do we wait till the next storm comes in? We got kind of caught on that decision when that snowbank then became ice. So is that something that we can manage? It's a personnel, it's a staffing issue. As I mentioned, we don't own the trucks that we need to keep that snowblower busy. So if we put our little trucks out there, where there's a lot of downtime, so we usually rent trucks, and Barry City has one or two, I believe. So so that's a difference. We lease or purchase one a 10-wheeler for the season, and then we get into a season where we have very little snow. Does that make sense? So some things we have to look at and consider before we get into the next winter, because the rentals can be unreliable, and then there's heavy demand for them when we call and they're not available. We've talked about shift changes with our union. That's not a popular thing, but it's something we have to look at. I'm not sure whether that's going to go anywhere, but again, it's a learning experience looking back at this. Another one is the winter parking ban, and I think that's one of the big focuses and certainly a change and difference with Barry City that has a full season parking ban, on-street parking ban. That has been challenging. We absolutely recognize and appreciate the beneficial aspects of it, and are here to support our community and do whatever we can to support these policy decisions. But it's also important that you know that there are trade-offs, as I mentioned, and that there's that's a matter of weighing priorities. When we can't plow to the street, to the curb at will, and those snowbanks get bigger, we do have to plan for snowbank removal rather than let's do it tonight. We've got a good crew. We're rested. Let's move forward. We got a storm coming in, and so there are things that we need to do to respond to that, changes that we've made ever since it was implemented in 2014-15 winter. One thing we know must improve is we must achieve a better voluntary compliance. The thing that we're struggling with right now is our towing company exceeded their capacity, ability to remove vehicles, and now we're having to plow around them. And we have one towing company left to work with, and we met with them and trying to come up with a plan to keep them here working for us so that we don't have to buy a tow truck. So to improve that is what can we do to improve compliance? This is often the case. No good deed goes unpunished. There's the complaints, challenging appeals are mostly heard by the manager's office and the police department. So those are difficult to try to work through and explain. And so what needs to be done? One thing we'd like to come back with is increasing fines, not to make money, but to get the word out. If there's people that are maybe gaming the system, maybe I get towed 4 or 5 times a year. It's less expensive than finding alternative off-street parking. I don't know what the situation is, but whatever the case is, we need the vehicles off the street for this plan to work.
Did you give us the towing numbers in here? I didn't see them. But I may have just read it too
believe
fast.
they are in the statistics.
Okay, I'll relook at it.
They're in there.
But
Yeah.
I thought they had slowed down. Maybe it was just the first
Depends.
year.
I mean, a lot of people do their own evaluation, maybe of well, it's going to storm tonight, and so I probably ought to move the vehicle. But if we're doing cleanup or snowbank removal, I'm speculating only that they are assuming that we don't need the parking ban. I'm not sure how that works, but the numbers are good for a predicted storm and much less later. So maybe we should extend that parking ban time period till we get full cleanup completed. Snowbanks removed, it's another option. Reducing the areas the snow ban actually is in effect. Where do we really need it in town? Where is parking demand, the off-street, the capacity doesn't exist. Because we have to provide an alternative parking location. Our hope is if the garage moves forward, that would be a great place for alternative overnight parking. In the meanwhile, we have to use these 2 lots and stone cutters, and that's been a challenge because we do have to plow them eventually. And
Tom, do the parking fines or the towing fines at least cover the cost of each tow?
so there's the fine for on-street parking. That's for being on the street when the event's
whether they're towed or
towed,
not.
and then there's the towing fee is a separate charge, so they're not combined. So if that vehicle is actually towed, then they have to pay the towing company.
Thank you.
But people sometimes get tickets and not towed because the towing company just doesn't get to them in time.
Another strategy we use is just the ticket, the fine only. If we're doing snowbank removal in a certain part of town, we really have to put the whole ban in effect because we have no other means of doing that. So those vehicles won't get towed, but they'll just get the fine. Some other ideas that we're looking at is the expenditure part of this. Possibility is the additional message board signs and maybe some remote beacons, lights that are on. Plattsburgh, New York has that. Light is on, the parking ban's in effect. Again, the idea is to gain compliance.
Does Burlington have those too?
Burlington has, you're familiar most with Burlington.
Yeah, when the lights are on, the cars are gone, yeah.
And just to check in on that, because I saw that too, it's the request is to do something like 6 beacons, and it says 7,000. Is that for all 6, or is that per each? I wasn't clear.
don't recall. Actually, I wrote this report some time ago, so it's, is that
price for each?
Is that price
For each? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay,
I'm not,
that's okay.
not positive. So this is an actual expenditure request right now.
Sure.
We're looking, so kind of a follow-up to this.
And I mean, and you, Tom, will have retired by the time we are making our next budget, and so I suppose this is obvious, but as one would assume that whoever steps in will have this information and be able to budget accordingly.
Yeah, so they'll work with whoever the successor is with the file and thick file on our winter parking ban that have accumulated and other things. So yes,
you'll be
that's
ready to
true.
consult. So.
I would really like to have this house in order by the time I leave. I don't want to leave problems or issues with for the next person. So to the extent that we can come up with a plan, it's that much less stressful for the next guy, and something that works for the community is really what this is all about. What we're trying to achieve, and to do our job as well.
Yep.
So it's a balance.
You missed a retirement date?
I'm sorry?
City manager's weekly report like 2 weeks ago or so.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gone. 2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I haven't read your report.
There was an announcement.
Yeah, so you're retired.
I know.
Shoot.
Right?
Could pass an ordinance preventing it.
What's that?
I said they could pass an ordinance preventing it.
Preventing your retirement.
Probably
Sorry.
require a charter.
I have trouble enforcing that one.
Super well.
A speed study on your.
Trying to get these things off my bucket list before I leave.
So are you one of those retirees we can get back part-time?
I will make myself as available as much as necessary, but not on a,
Well, thank you for putting this together. Any other comments, questions? Glenn, yeah.
I had just one other thing to mention. Peter Lux beat me to be the first person in the meeting to talk about climate change, I think. But this discussion, this report, which is great, and thank you very much for it, immediately reminded me of going to see Roger Hill talk a couple of weeks ago at the Unitarian Church. And I learned a lot of stuff there, among which learned that his prediction is that we're going to get more long spells of precipitation over weeks and months, sort of like we saw this past winter, more and more often over the coming 20, 30, 80 years. And given that, it was very convincing. I think it would be interesting to watch it too, just because it's a lot of cool stuff about the temperature gradient from the equator to the pole and why that takes energy out of the circumpolar cycle, which makes it less like a fast straight river and more like oxbows, which is where the standing fronts come in and why we get just rain forever and then drought forever, because it's just standing there like an oxbow. Anyway, given all that, I wonder whether you think we might consider more dramatic changes to our policy or plans in terms of staffing or how we operate. We may get a winter like this every year for a long time. Do we currently have the capacity to handle that every year?
Well, I guess I was trying to be kind, but not really get to that. Thank you for mentioning that. I think if the word retire is the operative part of that, is tired, and this is significantly very, very tiring in this position, and that kind of winter is really draining. The staffing level, it remains to be seen whether or not that's sustainable with what we have today if this were to actually continue, and I wish I'd seen that, but Roger does our our weekly reports or our actual updates of local a significant impact on just the burnout rate of personnel. But equipment, our budgets, and just the impact on everybody's lives, on what that means, that there's nothing worse than rain in the winter. Everything freezes. We can't get on top of it quickly enough. We can't de-ice it. And then it just freezes over again, and you haven't done anything on my street yet or sidewalk. And that's tough to take, and I hope it's not true, but we do have to be prepared for those types of possibilities and eventualities. This winter parking ban event-based program made a great deal of sense. We went 2, 3, 4 weeks without any precipitation that was plowable, and yet we were requiring people to not park on the street. So it's if we're in that type of season from a winter plowing or management perspective, it's not workable. If this were to continue, this is the norm, the new norm. I would suggest or hope or think that we would have to bring that to the city council's attention and say the city manager needs to really implement the winter parking ban event for the rest of the winter. If we can't get the snowbanks cleared, the sidewalks don't drain. The sidewalks don't drain, people are tripping and falling. And or you can't get from your car into the sidewalk. That's just not acceptable from our perspective. That's not the operational standard we want to take.
Right. I think that this year we had 11 rain events, which I've never seen before. I've been doing this for 36 years, and I've never seen that many rainstorms in the winter. Before, I think the year before that was 5, which I thought was a lot. So Roger probably has a point that, this maybe it'll get worse. And from my perspective, I wonder if our staffing levels are going to be adequate. If this is going to be the normal winter, I was wondering when people were going to mutiny this year. Mm-hmm. It was that bad. People were just burnt out and worn out when they weren't getting enough sleep, and if this is going to be the normal winter, somewhere down the line something has to change. So, and the parking ban is part of it, but I think staffing is another part of it. And I was using water sewer people, I was using mechanics, and everybody was tired. I mean, absolutely everybody just wanted it to be over, and it just seemed like it never ended. So.
Thanks, Roger, bringing that great information to us.
Yeah, it needs to be brought up, I think.
Yeah.
At least he confirmed why you were charged.
That's right.
Yeah, I've got one more winter in me. That's it. So.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like there's no level of just appreciation that can overcome that level of tired. You know what I mean? Like we all were so very grateful, but I totally hear you that if this is normal, we just need more people.
Yeah.
To handle that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's operational changes as well. So
mm-hmm.
you make adjustments, I think, too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think you'll see that the whole industry will start addressing this. As both Tom and I went to 2 snow conferences, national snow conferences. And I'm sure if you went this year, you would find that people are finding ways to adapt to this, and how do we do this? And I don't have the answer, but I would assume that everybody's looking at it.
Yeah, it's helpful to network, as we're not in this alone. It's gain a lot from those conferences and talking with their colleagues. So what people are doing, how they're innovating, and so maybe equipment changes. About a different sidewalk plow, that was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And maybe have our own trucks and for hauling snow. So where we used to just rent them 4 times a year, now we need them about every week. So it's and then try to get it out before it turns to ice, which is whole nother matter. So yeah, and Brian sends me stuff about this ice breaking machine that goes down the. So yeah,
I did. Never got a response, but anyways.
Well, thank you so much for putting this all together, and for all of your work this year and through this tough winter. Yeah. And so we'll look for some of these suggestions to be implemented potentially for next winter.
Sounds good.
So.
Yeah, I think definitely, if you have one takeaway from this, other than appreciating what DPW does, it's the winter parking ban. I mean, it's definitely, as Tom mentioned, we're down to one towing company and they're balking. I mean, it's because they're getting tired too. They're out pulling these all night, and if we can't tow, we don't have a ban. Yeah. And yet, it was implemented to help make downtown housing more feasible and all of that. So it's certainly, when we get a lot of complaints in the winter about, the roads aren't clean, and you look and you see, cars didn't move, they had to work around cars and to get those big vehicles down some of the streets because the snow started too late to call a ban, and it's tricky. And so,
well, and I guess I want to make sure that we as a council are still open to hearing, if the suggestion from DPW were this arrangement of the parking ban is no longer working, is no longer functional, that would be a really important message for us. That's not necessarily what I'm hearing at this point, but it sounds like that is a real possibility for the future. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we're all at least aware that could be the message.
Well, the social media is out there. I think that's truly beneficial if we use it that way. Talk to our neighbors. If you have a visitor in town that's here and isn't aware of what this event base is, you see a neighbor's car out in the street, let them know. Work with us on this. It's not all about us just making these calls. We rely on eyes on the street to tell us if there's a problem, and we would really find it helpful if people would help their neighbors and get those cars moved. Put it in my driveway, kind of a neighborly gesture would help us a lot. Help them. So it's a two-way street. If we look at it that way, as challenging as the winter can be, we can all do this together. Yep.
But it's not always a two-way street if the cars don't move.
Especially when it gets down to one lane. That's right.
That's a great point. That's what we can do for ourselves.
Well, thank you again. And I don't think we need to take any action on this at this point. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up to the ordinance amendments. So this is the second time we are reviewing Chapter 2, and I just want to, get to this item here a second. I'm assuming this is a public hearing. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing on the proposed amendments to Chapter 2 of the Code of Ordinances. Any comments from the public or the council?
I'm happy with them the way they are.
Okay. And no comments from the public. So I'm going to close the public hearing on Chapter 2. Any further comments from council? No. I feel pretty good about it as well.
I move Chapter 2.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. On to Chapter 3. So I am going to open the public hearing on the first reading. Wait a minute. This says third reading. I think it means...
This is the first one.
This is the first reading of Chapter 3. So yeah, opening public hearing. Any comments on Chapter 3?
I didn't see anything I wanted to change.
Good.
I have a few things. Some of them are maybe questions. In section 3-305I, which is about, there's a sentence in there that says, the City Council may reduce or waive at its discretion the connection charge for non-residential connections. And I wonder whether it would be worth considering giving ourselves the ability to reduce or waive connection charge for residential connections. It feels like we have some movement toward ADUs, for example, and If we want to encourage that, we might want to have the option to reduce or waive. I'd be curious to hear if anyone has an opinion on that, or we can just follow up next time.
Well, it'd be, yeah, why don't we get some feedback on that? Because I think, I'm not sure why, I'm assuming that the waiver for commercial was as part of some kind of, trying to get a company to come here or something, an economic development thing, whereas, probably, and this is an old ordinance that they probably didn't want, every single new homeowner trotting in saying, can you waive my...
I would not want to have that be the
right. So
the result.
Maybe there's some kind of issue. I do know we've had complaints in the past when people have added units in their house, kind of what you're talking about, and they've already got a connection, and now they're adding a second apartment. The other side of that is, well, now there's there's more impact on the water system, and so you're basically buying into an investment that people who paid for the water treatment plant and all the lines made, and you're becoming a stockholder, so to speak. Yes.
Donna?
I
I'm
just
sorry.
wondered if the non-residential connection had more parts to it, and the residential was more straightforward. No?
Don't know.
The other speculation I want to put out on that is, makes sense. When you have a new connection, you're buying in and so on. I wouldn't want to forego the option to get that fee. I also was thinking, reading this, that I think we heard here a couple of meetings back that many of the houses, the older houses in Montpelier, had an average occupancy of, or normal family was something like 16 people back when, and now it's 2, in these big old houses. So transforming some of those old houses with ADUs or something, yes, you're going from 2 people to 3 or 4 or 5, but I would think that at least in some cases you're still not even coming close to the original capacity of that house. So I think it'd be worth following up anyway. I'm having trouble pulling up the actual ordinances, so I'm looking at my email
What
notes.
section was that again, Glenn? I just want to make sure I flag it.
I think I've got it. I'm sorry?
What
Which
section?
section? That was 3-305, section I.
Page 6.
Yeah. And then 3-405, section C4, I just want to say out loud that I think this was about preventing going into the sewer system various things, including whole blood, paunch, manure, hair, and fleshings, which is a wonderful little array of things. And it seems to me like we I mean, in some ways I'd love to keep that in there just for the sake of it. It also feels like we could cut it off early in that section and say something, I think it's something like anything over half an inch is not allowed. And again, I might have to get back to the specific ordinance. Anyway, that. Had to say it in the public meeting. Section 3-412 about the sewer benefit charge. That language change is a little bit confusing to me. It looks like the original language was the city council determines that it's a benefit and so on, and therefore determines that we will charge for it. And the new language is something like the city council may determine. My impression is that that city council did determine, and I'm not sure why we would have to redetermine, so it just is confusing.
I'm still having trouble finding
Sorry.
it. 3-412.
It's the new 3-412, right? Sewer separation benefit charge.
Sewer separation benefit charge. That's right. Yes.
So, if if it goes from city council determines that separation, well, let me back up. If it's not the city council who's determining it, I don't know who would determine it. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I guess it just, I'm not sure why it's phrased. Honestly, I'm not sure why it's phrased either of those ways. It feels to me like it should be something more like, it's a benefit and we charge for it. Anyway, again, we don't need to determine it now, but I think it may need some follow-up.
Yeah, I don't know why we put that in. Someone added that. I'm not sure who. I'll add a question mark in that. We may not need that.
Okay.
And then the last thing, which is just for my own enjoyment, indulge me for a moment, I want to fess up that I am in violation, I believe, of section 3-510. No person shall in any manner change any natural water course on private property without first obtaining permission from the Public Works Director. There was a beautiful little trickle of water on our backyard, and I dug a hole and put a bathtub in it, and it is a joy and a pleasure in the summer, and I will ask for forgiveness from Tom before he retires. And I mean, a little bit more seriously, that seems potentially overreaching, maybe. It seems like a pretty heavy burden if anyone doing anything to a little trickle of water on their land has to ask Public Works first.
I actually disagree.
Yep.
How do you measure it?
Well, and I recall.
Well, then I really apologize. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I recall conversations with Jessica Edgerly Walsh on the council, who lives on Blackwell Street, where diverting drainage was a huge problem, and that if you divert it on your own property, that has
unknown consequences.
Potentially unknown, but serious consequences for people downhill. That it might go into their foundation or etc. It can be cumulative.
I stand corrected. That
it's okay.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, no worries.
We're still getting emails from someone regarding the Scribner Street situation. So.
I have one thing from Lauren, actually. She could not be here. Sorry, unless you're not done.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, so Lauren, I have not found this in my scrolling through, but she says, I wanted to note that I was interested in looking into possibly updating the language in section 3-405 C2. So I'll give you a second to get there. 3-405 C2, that's the use of public sewers. Okay, so she says, in particular, to provide greater clarity on defining toxic or poisonous substances, perhaps referencing state or federal hazardous waste lists or statutes to ensure that we are robustly protecting our waters from toxic contamination. So, something to look into. Yeah. Any further comments on Chapter 3? Okay. Any comments from the public? Chapter 3. Thank you for being here. All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing on Chapter 3. We have some things to look into on that, and I think we need to vote on the second reading for Chapter 3.
I move we schedule second reading for Chapter 3 for our meeting on June 26th.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's 9:30, and we are at Outcomes and Work Plan. Ready? Shall I turn it over to you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, this is taking. You've seen some of the outlines of this before, but basically taking the strategic plan work that you'd approved the content of it a a meeting or two ago, and simply calendaring this, and you have a draft of the calendar actually on your desks as well, and we've included it in the weekly memo. But if you don't like this or you want to make changes to the sequencing, we just tried our best to figure out when the best times might be and how much time we were going to need to prepare for something, and what topics might go with other topics on a certain night, so that we could group staff and those kinds of things. One thing that isn't explicitly mentioned on this list, I just noticed tonight, but we are planning to have a committee report too on most of these meetings, as you had the Conservation Committee tonight. That was our request. So this is basically trying to take your plan and put it into action.
Connor.
Yeah, just one note. I sort of considered the livable wage and socially responsible contracting ordinances, two separate ordinances, one being sort of the narrow scope of construction projects over $200,000. So just wanted to make sure that was everybody else's feeling. It's livable wage seems like a different animal, but I could see how they would be connected.
Right. I think the idea was to have them the same night. That was, so you're right, I can split that so it's clearer. But
other comments?
Good beginning.
Yeah.
I had a question about under environmental stewardship. Building Confluence Park is scheduled for July 2019. Right, it's listed right after a complete riverfront master plan. Just in thinking through the process with the Vermont River Conservancy, I mean, the Confluence, I mean, they're doing all kinds of, visioning of like what that can look like. And my assumption when you say here, build Confluence Park, that's just the first iteration, and that it may be revised.
Right, and in fact, if you look at the actual calendar, we have it, after you and I met with Ricardo, we actually moved that to September.
Oh, okay,
so it's on the calendar for September. That's when they're going to provide us the update of the plans, and
great.
We'll select.
I was feeling like that was fast, so okay, great.
Yes.
Glad to hear that.
And that was the time they agreed to.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? I have one other one. I'm very interested in the Stormwater Master Plan. I saw that implementation of the Stormwater Master Plan recommendations, again under environmental stewardship, is listed as ongoing, and ongoing is fine, but I would also love to just have a report, like where are we at, how, I don't know if it's possible for it to be like a no pressure kind of situation, because like I just want to know,
right.
I just want to know where we're at, and that's just helpful and informative. But having some kind of a check-in as to where we are, and in part the ongoing, the deadlines that say ongoing, again is in part fine, but just having some kind of a status update would be helpful. Like upgrading streetlights to LED. Maybe
So
update us when they're done. Or
we have a list, and I'm trying to find it, and I'm not seeing it with the material that we have here. In the weekly report, there's the calendar of events, and then underneath it, it has a list of pending reports, and then also a list of pending items that need to be discussed during budget time. So these are items that have sort of specific council actions that are calendared, and then we took, so I think your stormwater plan is in that list of reports.
Great.
But I'll
Okay.
confirm that, but I think
Okay.
it is. And just like the streetlights is a budget decision, so it needs to be
Fair.
analyzed, and so it's on that list as a budget decision.
Okay. Great. I mean, that was the only comments I had. Let's see. Do we need to? I think we need to approve. If there's no other comments, then is there a motion regarding the strategic outcomes work plan? Unless there are more comments.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? Okay. Seeing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So motion carries. Thank you for putting that together.
for participating. It's helpful.
Yeah, looking forward to all this great work. Okay, and we are done with our regular business, and it's only 9:40. That's pretty good. Okay, so council reports. Anyone like to start? Oh, yeah, Don.
As much as it's great to have the flashing beacons, I find that I really don't cognize them well as a driver. As a pedestrian, you push it, and maybe it's with all the construction, especially the one down at Main and Berry Street. I just don't see it. And I wondered if the lighting went around the triangle that would be more. We got discussing it at the May meeting at the Montpelier, our transportation committee, and Jennifer and others said the same thing, Heather, that they weren't noticing them as a driver and were concerned that the pedestrians were depending on them, but for the driver they weren't easily seen. So just ask all of you to note it and where they are and how you react to them as a driver. Thank you.
I think that's a very good point, and I think that those flashing beacons might really be a step on the way to a pedestrian activated red light. That might be, you know, what's supposed to happen. Someone's supposed to stop anyway when you're when you're in a crosswalk. I don't know how feasible it is to say, well, every time someone wants to cross the street, you can activate a red light, but we may be going up.
Because it was supposed to leave some responsibility on the pedestrian to look both ways. And a light wouldn't.
Connor.
All right, got a couple things. Scooter e-bike update. Had my third phone call with Gotcha, the company who's working with Burlington. It'll just be e-bikes. Starting soon there, they're expanding their program. You know, they're still considering us and our viability factor for them. But right now we have no proposals on the table for e-bikes or scooters. So I've sort of been holding back on having a big public input session until we have something to have public input on. So I'll continue having conversations, and I'm keeping Sue in the loop on this stuff. Should have another meeting with them next week. I did say we'd be interested in the e-bikes too, just given the starfish shape of Montpelier here. It was kind of embarrassing on Halloween when I was trying to ride a scooter up a hill, and a bunch of trick-or-treaters were actually passing me, just walking, sort of making fun of me, something awful. So I keep everybody posted, but we still have 116 survey results from the previous pilot run, as well as the analytics that Bird gave us. So we'll keep everybody posted on that. A couple other things, just piggybacking off, I think Lauren brought it up last time. We passed our single-use plastics ban. The legislature thought it was such a good idea that they passed it statewide. It's on the governor's desk right now because we passed it by an overwhelming majority there. If anybody's interested in seeing this go into effect, I give the governor's office a call at 802-828-3333 over the next couple of days. I think that would be important. And lastly, I just wanted to flag, like in our last budget, we appropriated $2,000 for child care at city council meetings, and just with July coming up, I don't know if city staff's been thinking about this at all, but I do have a contact in Pittsburgh where it's a very successful program, so I don't think we'd have to reinvent the wheel, and I see it being a pretty modest program, but from night like tonight, you know, there were a lot of people who might have had trouble like finding child care, so it might have been beneficial, so happy to work on that with city staff if that's helpful. That's it for me. Thanks.
I have nothing to say tonight except see you tomorrow morning at Bagito's, 8:30 to 9:30. Thank you.
Maybe just one thing. Tonight, I recently heard from a resident asking us to look into an ordinance that would prohibit balloon releases in the city. There's been a lot of information that's come out lately about balloon releases and how they spread this toxic material all over wherever they go, because every balloon that is released pops and comes back down, and it affects wildlife. And so I just started looking at that, figure out if that is something that's already within the powers and duties of the city council in the charter, but and I'm not sure what the answer is yet. Maybe it is, but so it would be good if we could adopt it as an ordinance without having to go to the legislature. On the other hand, we could be the model for the rest of the state, like the plastic bag ban. But you'll be hearing more about that.
Just as a first pass, that seems very interesting to me, and probably not surprising, but let's talk more about it.
Oh, one other thing, because are you going to say something
About
winning the championship?
Oh, I was not.
Well, okay. I didn't think you were going to blow your own horn, but congratulations to the Montpelier boys and girls ultimate teams for winning the first ever state championship, and congratulations to our mayor and coach for one thing, getting the state championships established, and two, leading those teams to victory. It's really, I think ultimate is really a great sport in terms of contribution to physical fitness, stamina, eye-hand coordination, and good sportsmanship, and the most important value of the whole sport, which is the spirit of the game. And for Anne to take such a lead at promulgating that through our youth is just a great thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's incredibly satisfying to get Ultimate to this point, and I don't usually like to toot my own horn, so it's a little weird to say, but it really was historic, like for the country, to have that happen, and it's very exciting. I mean, the national organization USA Ultimate is regularly in touch with myself and other coaches who are influential in making this happen, because they want us to be a model for the rest of the country, and we all are sort of aware that this is the direction Ultimate is going, and it's just very exciting to be out front. So thanks. Yeah, it's cool. It's over. Whew. And the season's done, and I can move on with my life. Okay, great. Phew. Awesome. Anyway.
And now it's your report.
Oh, right, I'm up. Okay. So I just want to acknowledge that we had 2 different conferences happening in Montpelier the last week, downtown and historic preservation, as well as an arts conference. And as far as I know, they were huge successes, and my goodness, brought so many people to town. And I don't know if you got a chance to go to the party on Langdon Street, but that was very fun. It was pretty exhilarating there. Yeah, hope that we can continue to have such conferences. That was great. So that was one thing I wanted to highlight. I also wanted to highlight just the new painting that's on the Heaney lot. That's just super cool to see some public art happening right in our downtown. Besides that, I just want to also note that I am really interested in a few upcoming conversations. We've talked a little bit about having a night dedicated to all things transportation in Montpelier. It'll probably be a Wednesday night. That's not a regularly scheduled council meeting, where we'll get a lot. There'll be no motions to be passed necessarily, but just get updates and get some information there. I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to further conversation about energy efficiency and energy labels or profiles in residential buildings. That should be a good conversation. I want to make sure that people are aware that that is happening, and we're going to intentionally reach out to stakeholder groups to make sure that we've got a robust set of input on that. And 2, that I'm looking to have some further dialogue with particularly residents of Berry Street on the Berry, and Main Street, I suppose, as well, on the Berry Main Street scoping study as to what to do, particularly at the intersection of Barry and Main. So I'm yet to iron those out, but now that the season is over and school's almost done, I have a lot more space in my brain, so I'm looking forward to putting those on the calendar sometime likely over the summer, and hopefully with lots of opportunities potentially for further input. So just wanted to highlight those, and that is it for me.
Well, I'm sorry, folks, but actually I have a really long list of things. I don't usually say much. First of all, I'm sure you all know Peggy in my office. If you haven't heard, her husband passed away a couple weeks ago, so we've all been keeping her and her family in our thoughts, but I didn't know if you all had known that. So, also staying in my office, Crystal Chase is back. After being away for more than a year helping her daughter recover from leukemia. And I want to covering for her has been sort of piecing together people at various times in various ways, and I really need to thank Sheila Healy, Cindy Larson, Lee Youngman, Jennifer Loughran, who've all been at one time or another, to one degree or another, really filling those roles, and just things would not have worked without them. Let you all know that I passed my Civil War letters over to Glenn, who's taking care of them for me.
You're what now?
My Civil War letters.
Oh, Civil War letters.
They're all going to get framed.
Beautiful.
I'm
wonderful.
going
And
to
we
do
are
the
going
whole
to
little museum thing.
Yes,
great.
encapsulate them and frame them. I can't wait.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I'm really glad. I was really worried about carrying them around all the time. I was afraid I was going to spill coffee on them or something.
They're safe in the press.
And Paul Carnahan is helping with transcribing them, because
Nice.
I've only gotten so far. They're very hard to read. I should mention that water bills are going to be due Monday, since the deadline falls on a weekend. Also let folks know, if anybody's still listening, that recording and vault time costs in the clerk's office are going to go up by 50% and 100% respectively next month, as per the new statute. So be ready for that. And last thing, I am going to blow my own horn for a little moment here, that I completed the University of Minnesota Humphreys Public Affairs School's Certificate in Election Administration, finally, although I think I still owe them for the last bill. And also, I've been asked to speak at the biggest international hackers conference, DEF CON in Las Vegas, on an alternative logical construction for protecting statewide election systems. And I've given him a paper, and I'm very happy about that.
Awesome.
So anyway, that's all. The paper, it's actually not very technical. I'll do it. Yeah. I'll send it around.
Educate us.
All right.
Couple things. One, to follow up. Actually, the first thing of all is, while we were talking about Ultimate, we failed to mention that both of those teams were undefeated for the entire season. Right. And then following up on the Barry Main process, I actually had on my list to bring up too. I have learned, because I occasionally talk to our fellow staff members, that the downtown master plan that we now apparently need money for is getting ready to start, or is starting. And one of the key pieces it needs is our decisions, or at least likely decisions, at the very least on the Barry Main intersection and the Spring Street intersection. Will they be roundabouts? Will they be those kind of things? Because their design will be working around our choices. So Mike Miller really hopes that we can have some sort of decision, at least on that aspect of it, maybe not necessarily taking out parking spaces and the other things, by the August 14th meeting, or at the August 14th meeting. So whatever process we want to have, and this was news to me since I last talked to you, so we need to get...
When are you hoping to have that done by?
Well, he actually was hoping by July, and I told him that just wasn't going to happen. And so so we compromised on August 14th. And so that's one of our meetings. So that's got to happen. Another perhaps more interesting deadline, I got a call yesterday from the gentleman who's sort of I don't know what his actual title is. Let me see if I can, he's the Communication and Public Affairs Manager, Nick Sherrick, for All Earth Renewables. And they're aware of something called federal build grants. And these are new grants that support transportation infrastructure projects, including passenger rail. And apparently this year, half of the total money goes to rural areas, and for the grant from all of Vermont is considered rural. And they're for both construction and infrastructure, but they can also be used for the first time this year for planning and project development. And so there's an opportunity to apply for up to $10 million for upgrades in the line between Barrie and Montpelier, as well as additional planning funds, all without a need for matching dollars. And given that the transportation bill this year specifically directed V-Trans to look at the Barrie-Montpelier corridor and not anywhere else, they think that would be somewhat competitive. Anyway, so there's a grant application deadline by July 15th. He actually thought it was June 15th, and he was calling me in a panic that he wasn't going to make it in time for this meeting, but it was July 15th. So I told him I believed this is something we would want to support, that it was consistent with our strategic plan and goals and policies. But just so you know, there will likely be an official action on your agenda to approve an application for this, and I think they're going to reach out to the city of Barrie as well. That's just an FYI.
Great.
And then we also need to, you already mentioned the alternate transportation forum. Oh, that was one of my questions. No, I was going to say, should we include the Barrie, Maine stuff on the alternate transportation forum, but I just talked myself out of it.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so I believe there's no other outstanding business. So, without objection, we're going to adjourn the meeting. And it is 5 till 10.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Most importantly, it's between the second and third period, and the Bruins are losing 2-0. So, we got to get going in the third period or else.